she never meant for him to see it. The name had been sitting in her phone for months, hidden in plain sight, a private joke she told only to herself in the dark of her apartment when the loneliness got too loud. Future husband. Maybe. 3 words. Saved under the contact of the one man she could never have. The richest man she knew. Her best friend. The father of a little girl who had already stolen her heart without permission. And now he was standing in her kitchen, holding her phone, staring at the screen, completely silent. This is the story of 2 people who spent 5 years pretending they were just friends. And one rainy Thursday night that made it impossible to keep lying. If you've ever loved someone you were afraid to lose, stay with me until the end. Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. Chicago in November had a particular cruelty to it. The wind didn't just blow, it found the gaps between your coat buttons, the space between your scarf and your jaw, and it pushed into those places like it had something to prove. The sky turned the color of old concrete before 4 in the afternoon, and the Lake Michigan, sitting gray and enormous on the city's eastern edge, churned like something restless and unsatisfied. It was the kind of city that hardened people who weren't already hard. And Ethan Cole had been hard for a long time. At 32, Ethan occupied a particular kind of exhaustion that had no clean name. Not burnout. That word belonged to people who worked too many hours at jobs that frustrated them. What Ethan experienced was more fundamental than that. It was the weight of living 2 completely separate lives simultaneously, and doing both of them alone. During the day, he was the version of himself that Chicago's business press had spent 3 years constructing into something almost mythological. Cole Capital's youngest managing partner. The turnaround king. The man who sees value, where everyone else sees wreckage. His fund had taken 11 companies in the previous 4 years, organizations most investors had written off as expensive lessons, and rebuilt them into things that actually worked. He had a gift for it, people said. For walking into a dying company, understanding exactly what had gone wrong, and convincing people who had already given up to try again. What the press never quite captured was how relentlessly unsexy the actual work was. 18-hour days reviewing financial disclosures, conference calls with creditors at 6 in the morning, sitting across from founders who had built something over decades and now had to listen to a 32-year-old in a decent suit tell them what needed to change. The meetings were rarely dramatic. They were mostly just long and tiring, and required the kind of sustained attention that left you feeling scraped empty at the end of every week. He kept an office on the 41st floor of a building on Wacker Drive with windows that looked out over the river. He had a good assistant named Marcus who managed his calendar with military precision. He had a driver, though he used him less than people expected because he genuinely preferred driving himself. It was the 1 hour of the day when nobody needed anything from him, and he could just be a person moving through the world. In the evening, the other Ethan Cole took over. This Ethan wore sweatpants. This Ethan knew which brand of mac and cheese his daughter would actually eat versus the kind she would push around the bowl with theatrical suffering until he gave up and made her toast. This Ethan had learned to braid hair by watching YouTube tutorials at 11 o'clock at night, sitting on the bathroom floor with his phone propped against the toilet tank, practicing on a plastic doll until he could do something that resembled what his daughter asked for. Her name was Lily. She was 7, and she was the most complete and complicated person Ethan had ever met. She had her mother's dark eyes that somehow communicated an entire emotional landscape before her mouth had formed a single word. She had Ethan's stubbornness, which was sometimes charming and more often genuinely difficult to manage when it was pointed at him. She collected rocks, not polished gemstones or anything organized, just rocks she found interesting, picked up from sidewalks and playgrounds and the parking lot of the grocery store, which she kept in a cardboard shoebox under her bed. She had opinions about her rocks. She had named several of them. She was the best thing in his life and also the thing he was most terrified of failing. Her mother, Claire, had died when Lily was 3. An aneurysm, one of those catastrophic medical events that arrives without warning, gives you no time to negotiate, and leaves behind a silence so large it reorganizes everything around it. Ethan had been in a meeting when it happened. He never fully forgave himself for that, even though no rational part of him believed being present would have changed anything. Grief didn't care much about rational. For the first year after Claire died, Ethan functioned the way machines function when they've been programmed to keep running past the point of sense. He worked. He took care of Lily. He went to the therapy sessions his business partner insisted on with the same grim determination he brought to difficult board meetings. He did not fall apart in any visible way, because falling apart visibly would have required surrendering control, and surrendering control, even momentarily, felt like something he simply could not afford. He got through it. He rebuilt around the loss the way people do, not by healing exactly, but by reorganizing the furniture of his interior life so that the empty space was less immediately visible. What he hadn't managed to rebuild was the willingness to be truly known by another person. He'd dated, a few times over the past 4 years, carefully, cautiously, women who were accomplished and interesting and fundamentally deserving of more than what he could manage to offer. It never lasted past 3 or 4 months, and the reasons were always slightly different on the surface. But underneath they were always the same. He couldn't make himself open up enough to matter. He could be charming and attentive and genuinely good company. But there was a locked room somewhere inside him, and he handed women the keys without telling them that the keys didn't actually work. The person who had somehow picked the lock without even trying, without Ethan noticing it happening, which was the part that baffled him when he thought about it too directly, was a 30-year-old waitress named Mia Bennett, who lived in a small apartment on the north side and had walked into his life through a birthday party for a mutual friend 5 years ago, introduced herself by stealing the last piece of his birthday cake before he could get to it, and said, without apology, that she had seen him eyeing it for 10 minutes, and if he'd actually wanted it, he should have moved faster. He had laughed so hard he'd knocked over his drink. And somehow, from that completely unremarkable beginning, she had become the most important person in his life that he wasn't related to. Mia Bennett would have described her life at 30 as manageable, which was the word she used when she wanted to sound reasonable and not like someone who cried in the parking lot of the grocery store sometimes because the price of good produce had gone up again and she'd had to do the math 3 times before putting a bag of bell peppers back on the shelf. She worked at a restaurant called Harlow's in Lincoln Park, a mid-range place that attracted a reliable stream of business lunches and date nights and large family dinners with complicated dietary restrictions and grandmothers who sent things back twice. She was a good waitress. She was efficient and warm and possessed of an almost supernatural ability to read a table in the first 90 seconds and calibrate exactly how much personality versus invisible professionalism the situation required. She worked doubles 4 days a week, sometimes 5, when someone called in sick and she needed the money. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building on Ravenswood that was clean and quiet and structurally fine, even if the heating was inconsistent in winter and the upstairs neighbor had a dog that paced at midnight like a furry metronome. The apartment was small enough that she'd learned to be creative about storage. Every surface that could serve double duty did. Her kitchen table functioned as a kitchen table, a desk, a crafting station, and occasionally a surface where she spread out bills and sat with a cup of coffee, trying to figure out which ones she could push a week. She had a degree in communications from a state school she'd worked through on scholarships and part-time jobs, and one ill-advised credit card that had taken 3 years to pay off. She had moved to Chicago at 24 with plans that had been reasonable at the time and had simply collided with the reality of what the city actually cost. She had intended the waitressing to be temporary. It was now 6 years and counting. The plan was always just around the corner. She would save enough to go back to school. She would land the marketing coordinator job she interviewed for. She would start the small catering side business she'd sketched out in a notebook that currently lived at the back of a kitchen drawer beneath a collection of takeout menus she never threw away. The notebook had 47 pages of notes and 0 progress, because progress required capital, and capital required time she didn't have. And time she didn't have required not working. Doubles. And not working doubles would mean the rent math stopped working, so she stayed exactly where she was, moving just enough to feel like motion without actually getting anywhere. She was also, though she would not have used this word herself, lonely. Not in a dramatic way. She had friends, real ones, women she'd met through work, and a book club she attended occasionally, and a yoga class she'd signed up for 2 years ago, and continued partly for the exercise, and partly because she liked the instructor, and partly because the studio was warm in winter, and she could stay for 90 minutes without spending money. She had her sister Jess in Milwaukee, who called every Sunday and with whom she could say almost anything. But there was a specific kind of loneliness that company didn't touch. The loneliness of coming home to a quiet apartment at 10:30 after a double shift and sitting on the couch in the dark for 10 minutes before turning on a lamp, Not because you liked the dark, but because the motion of turning on the light acknowledged that you were home. And home was just this, just you, just the quiet, just the small space that was entirely yours and entirely empty at the same time. She hadn't dated seriously in 2 years. There had been a guy named Derek who was attractive and financially stable and completely wrong for her in ways she hadn't recognized quickly enough. That had ended badly enough to leave a mark. After that, she'd been cautious. And caution had slid into avoidance, and avoidance had gradually become a kind of default that she told herself was intentional self-preservation. She was, she maintained, completely fine. She was not completely fine. And the person who knew this better than anyone, the person who had been watching her maintain this fiction for years and had the good sense not to say so directly, was Ethan Cole, who had his own equally well-maintained fiction, and who called her every Tuesday evening when she got off work, and who had somehow become as necessary to her daily life as her own heartbeat, without either of them ever discussing what that meant. The friendship, if you were going to call it that, and both of them called it that, loudly and often, the way you emphasize a word when you're trying to convince yourself it means what you're saying it means, had developed in the unremarkable organic way that real connections do. Not through grand gestures or meaningful conversations on park benches at golden hour, just through accumulation, just through time and proximity and the gradual discovery that another person was exactly the kind of company you wanted without having engineered it. In the first year, they were genuinely just friends. Friends who texted each other about television shows and sent photographs of things they thought were funny and had dinner once a month that stretched into 3 hours because neither of them wanted to stop talking. Ethan introduced her to his daughter when Lily was 4 because Lily was central to his life, and he didn't keep the central things from people he trusted. Mia brought Lily a set of watercolor paints and spent an afternoon doing art projects on Ethan's kitchen floor that resulted in 3 genuinely beautiful child paintings and 1 permanently stained grout line that Ethan still hadn't told his housekeeper the full truth about. Lily decided within approximately 45 minutes that Mia was her person. Children have this, an uncomplicated directness of affection that adults have spent years learning to suppress. Lily simply climbed into Mia's lap at one point, announced that Mia smelled like cookies, even though she hadn't baked any, and that was apparently sufficient basis for a devoted friendship that had held steady for 3 years. In the second year, the friendship started to develop the particular texture of something that didn't need to announce itself. Mia had a rough month. Derek was part of it, and money was part of it, and a water leak from the apartment above that destroyed her bookshelf and took 6 weeks of arguing with her landlord to resolve. And Ethan showed up on a Thursday night with Indian food and no particular agenda and just sat with her while she talked about it. And then they watched 2 bad movies and he didn't go home until midnight because neither of them had noticed how late it was. Her shelf got fixed because Ethan hired someone, insisting afterward that it had been embarrassingly cheap and she wasn't allowed to feel weird about it, which she felt weird about for 2 weeks before deciding he was right. He had a shelf problem himself, it turned out. Not a metaphorical one. Literally a floating shelf in his home office that had been incorrectly installed by the previous owner and that he'd been meaning to fix for 8 months. Mia showed up one Saturday with a drill she'd borrowed from a neighbor and a how-to video bookmarked on her phone, and they spent 4 hours on it, which was 3.5 hours longer than it should have taken because neither of them was particularly good at it, and they argued twice about the level, and the finished shelf was not perfectly straight but was functional. And Ethan told her it was the best shelf in the building, which was objectively not true, but she laughed anyway. This was how they were together. Nothing was efficient, everything took longer than it should, and neither of them minded. By the 3rd year, Mia was present in Ethan's home the way only a few people are present in someone's life. Not constantly, not with any formal arrangement, but woven in. She knew where the spare key lived. She knew Lily's school schedule, and which teacher Lily currently found ridiculous and why. She knew what Ethan stress cooked when a deal was going badly. Always pasta, always too much of it, always at an unreasonable hour. And she knew that the pasta was never actually about being hungry. It was about needing to do something with his hands when his brain wouldn't stop. She texted him after bad shifts sometimes. He called her back. He texted her when Lily said something that broke his heart in a funny way, because Lily regularly did this without understanding the impact, and there was nobody else in his life he could send those messages to and have them fully land. Their friends, the mutual ones, the few who had become genuinely close over the years, Stopped asking if they were dating somewhere around year 2, which was about when they started exchanging looks. These were looks exchanged sideways. When Ethan said something that made Mia laugh, or when Mia defended some position with the cheerful stubbornness she brought to everything, and Ethan watched her with an expression that had no casual business being on someone's face when they were looking at their friend. Rachel, Mia's closest friend from Harlow's, had said it plainly about 18 months ago. "You know he's in love with you." "He's not," Mia said. "I've met him 5 times." "He's not. We're friends. It's different." Rachel had the good sense not to push, but she also did not retract the observation, and it lived in the back of Mia's mind for weeks afterward like a splinter she couldn't quite reach. The thing was, and this was the thing Mia circled around in the dark, late at night, the thing she had never said out loud to anyone, including her sister. She knew what the look on his face meant. She knew because she made it too, and she knew what hers meant, which meant she understood what his meant, and understanding what it meant while having absolutely no intention of doing anything about it was a particular kind of quiet suffering that she'd become skilled at managing. She hadn't done anything about it because of a calculus she'd run so many times it had worn grooves in her. Ethan Cole was a billionaire. She worked doubles to afford bell peppers. He lived in a 4-bedroom house in Lincoln Park with original crown molding. She lived in a 1-bedroom with a neighbor whose dog paced at midnight. He had attended every major cultural event in Chicago in the last 3 years. She had attended his events as his guest, wearing the same black dress she'd bought 4 years ago and hoping nobody looked too closely. She was not stupid about the world. She had grown up watching what happened when people reached for things significantly outside their weight class. She had watched her mother do it twice, marry men who were supposed to lift her up and instead left her right where she'd started, except now also confused and embarrassed. She had told herself very clearly at 24, be realistic. Know what you are and what you're not. Don't let a feeling make your decisions for you. What she hadn't fully accounted for was how the feelings would compound with time. How 5 years of being the person someone called first, the person someone trusted with their daughter, the person someone looked at like that, how that would slowly become impossible to pretend away. She had tried to date other people. It hadn't worked. Not because she compared everyone to Ethan explicitly, but because something just kept being absent. Some quality of ease, of recognition, of that specific comfort that she'd stopped noticing was rare until she was in someone else's company and it wasn't there. She had not told Ethan any of this. She had saved his contact as future husband, maybe on a night in June, late, after getting home from a work event he'd invited her to, a little warm from the wine and a lot warm from watching him take care of everyone in the room the way he always did. And she had told herself it was a private joke that didn't mean anything. She would change it eventually. It was just funny. It was just for her. It stayed for 6 months. And then, on a rainy Thursday in November, everything changed. It had started the way most important evenings start, with absolutely no warning that they were about to become important. Mia got off her shift at 6 and texted Ethan on the bus home. Nothing meaningful, a complaint about a table of 6 who had camped for 2 hours and left a 15% tip on a large check, which she punctuated with an emoji she used specifically for low-grade life injustice. He texted back, "Come over. Lily's with my parents tonight. I'll cook." She texted back a single word. "No." He sent back, "Mia." She sent, "Last time you cooked, you somehow made chicken sad." He sent, "I've improved." She sent, "You haven't, but fine." She went home first, changed out of her work clothes, the black pants and white shirt that smelled like other people's dinners, and put on jeans and a sweatshirt that had a small bleach stain near the hem she kept forgetting to throw away. She pulled her hair up. She didn't put on more makeup because it was Ethan, and she'd given up pretending she was someone who wore makeup to hang out with Ethan 2 years into this friendship. She took the bus to his neighborhood. It was raining by the time she got there. The kind of November rain that couldn't commit to being snow, but also wasn't really interested in being rain, just cold and vaguely menacing and everywhere at once. She stood on his front porch for 15 seconds digging for her keys. She had a key, had had one for 2 years, and she used it without ceremony because that was the kind of friendship this was. And then she was inside, in the warmth, hanging up her coat in the entryway where she always hung it. The kitchen smelled like garlic and olive oil and something that had been slightly overcooked, which tracked. "Told you," she said, coming around the corner. Ethan was standing at the stove looking at a pan of pasta with the particular expression of a person who had done everything the recipe said and things had still not gone well. He was still in his work clothes, dress pants, sleeves rolled up, tie gone. He'd loosened the top button of his shirt. He looked, as he always did in this mode, like someone who was extremely good at certain things and actively bad at this one specific thing. "It's fine," he said, without conviction. "What happened to it?" "I don't know. I followed the instructions." She came up beside him and looked in the pan. "Did you salt the water?" A pause that lasted 1 second too long. "Ethan, it has sauce. Salt the water." She took the spoon from him with the ease of someone who had done this many times, because she had done this many times. "Go sit down. I'll fix it. I can fix my own pasta." And yet, he laughed. Not a big laugh, just a short, genuine one, and stepped back and let her take over, leaning against the counter and watching her move around his kitchen with the ease of long familiarity. She knew where the salt was. She knew which burner ran hot. She knew the pasta strainer was in the third cabinet from the left, and not the second, which was where anyone would logically put it, but where Ethan didn't, for reasons she'd stopped interrogating. "How was your day?" he asked. "I told you about the table." "Before the table." She considered. "Slow morning. Got assigned to a private room for a corporate lunch, and the meeting went long, and they kept ordering dessert rounds, and I stood in the hallway for 45 minutes reading a Wikipedia article about the history of velvet." "What did you learn?" "That velvet has a surprisingly complicated past and that I should have gone to culinary school." "You hate cooking." "I hate cooking what I currently have access to. If I had better equipment, I think I'd feel differently." "Do you actually believe that?" "No," she said, "but it's a nice thing to believe." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the rain had gotten heavier, drumming against the kitchen window in an inconsistent rhythm that was almost musical. The kitchen was warm. The overhead lights were on, but she'd turned on the small lamp on the counter too, because she always did. She found overhead-only lighting depressing, which Ethan had noted once and thereafter kept a small lamp on the kitchen counter available. She'd never asked if he'd done that deliberately. She'd thought about asking. She hadn't asked. She was stirring the pasta and he was leaning against the counter, and they were talking about nothing, about the Velvet Wikipedia article, about a thing Lily had said at school that week that had been both deeply 7-year-old and somehow profound in a way that made Ethan still confused about how to respond to it. And the evening was doing exactly what evenings between them always did, which was expand comfortably to fill whatever space was available. She had a wooden spoon in one hand and was reaching for a pinch of dried oregano with the other when her phone buzzed on the counter. She looked at her hand, the one holding the spoon, which was covered in sauce. "Can you check that?" she said, without really thinking about it. Ethan, also without thinking, picked up her phone. And then he stopped. She turned to look at him when the silence lasted 1 beat too long. His face had changed. Not dramatically. Ethan's face rarely changed dramatically. He'd spent years cultivating the ability to not telegraph what he was thinking. But she knew his face with the precision that came from 5 years of watching it, and something had shifted in the set of his jaw, in the quality of his stillness. "Ethan?" He looked up from the phone slowly, and she could see, in the half-second before his expression fully composed itself, that whatever he'd read had reached him somewhere he hadn't expected. He turned the phone toward her. The screen was lit up with a notification from a friend, and right there, at the top of the screen, was her contact list preview that had decided, in the unhelpful way that phone interfaces revealed things you hadn't chosen to share, to display the name she'd saved him under. Future husband. Maybe. Mia felt her entire body do something she had no name for. A kind of thermal event. Heat rushing upward through her chest, into her face. The spoon was suddenly wet and heavy in her hand. The pasta had stopped mattering. She reached out and took the phone from him. Her voice, when it came, was trying very hard to be normal. "It's a joke. It's silly. It's just, Mia. It's nothing. It's one of those things you put in your contacts when you're... It was a long time ago. I don't even... Mia." His voice was quiet. Not alarmed, not amused, not anything she could easily categorize. "Stop." She stopped. The rain against the window, the low sound of something still cooking, the the small lamp casting a warm circle on the kitchen counter between them. She looked at the phone in her hands. Then she looked at him, and she could tell, from the way he was looking back at her, steady, unhurried, with something in his eyes that she had spent years refusing to name, that this was not something she was going to be able to laugh off. Not this time. It was a joke, she said again, quieter. Not convincingly. Was it? She didn't answer for a long moment. The pasta was definitely overcooking again, and some distant part of her brain registered this and let it go. I don't know, she finally said. Honest, painful, honest. Ethan set down the phone, carefully, like it was something that mattered, and looked at her. Tell me, he said. She told him, not all at once. It came out the way true things tend to come out, in pieces, without particularly good transitions, the narrative logic emerging halfway through rather than being present at the start. She put down the spoon. She turned off the burner. She leaned against the counter opposite him, and he stayed where he was, and they stood facing each other in his warm kitchen while rain came down outside. And she told him the things she'd been holding for the better part of a year. It was in June, she started, after that benefit thing you brought me to, the one at the Art Institute. He nodded. He remembered it. You spent the whole night. There were all these people, important people, people who probably needed things from you, and you kept... She paused. She was picking her words with unusual care, which wasn't her normal mode. Mia's normal mode was direct and fast. There was a woman, early in the night, one of the event organizers. She was having a panic attack in the hallway. Nobody else noticed. You noticed. I remember. You spent 20 minutes with her, just calm, just talking her through it, getting her water, staying until she felt okay. And you never mentioned it. You just came back and poured me a glass of wine and made a joke about the canapes. She exhaled. And I don't know, something about that... Her voice changed register slightly. I'd already been... I don't know how long I'd been feeling it, honestly. I think I'd been lying to myself for a while. But that night, it was just very clear. Ethan didn't say anything. He waited the way he did, patiently, without filling silences to make them easier, which was one of the things about him that had always been both comforting and disarming. When I got home, I'd had some wine, I was feeling... She laughed, a small, uncomfortable sound. I changed the name in my contacts, and I told myself it was funny, a private joke, something to make me laugh when you texted me about boring work things. Did it? At first, she looked at the phone on the counter. Then it just kept being there. And every time you texted me, I'd see it before I opened the message, and it stopped being funny and started being something else. She looked up at him. This part was harder to say. I didn't do anything about it because... You know why I didn't do anything about it, Ethan? He waited. Because look at this, she said, and she meant everything. His house, his life, the life that existed on the other side of the one she had. And look at me. I'm a waitress in Lincoln Park. I'm 30 years old and I'm still doing the math on bell peppers at the grocery store. I couldn't even... She shook her head. I didn't want to be someone who complicated your life because she'd convinced herself something could work that clearly couldn't work. I didn't want to be that person. That person, he repeated, the one who reaches for something and then pulls everything down because she miscalculated. Silence. Then Ethan pushed off the counter and crossed the kitchen. Not fast, just deliberate. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head up slightly to maintain eye contact, which she did, because she was not going to look away from this. Can I say something? He asked. She spread her hands in a small gesture. Obviously. I've been lying to myself, he said, for longer than June. She felt something shift in her chest. She kept her face still. She was very good at this. Every relationship I've been in for the last 4 years, he stopped, started differently. There's a woman I went on 4 dates with last spring, Emma. She was great, smart, interesting, genuinely funny. My mother liked her, which is not a small thing. A pause. We went out for dinner on a Thursday and she said something. I don't even remember what it was. Something about a movie. And I thought, I should tell Mia about this. And then I realized I'd thought that exact thing on every single date I'd been on for 3 years. Whatever happened, whatever was interesting or funny or strange, my first thought was always you. Mia was quiet. Lily talks about you, he said. Unprompted. She'll be in the middle of something completely unrelated and she'll just bring you up. Like you're just part of the furniture of her mind, and I don't think she's wrong about that. Ethan, I'm not done. His voice was gentle, but he wasn't stopping. I let myself believe it was just friendship, that this was just what a really good friendship felt like, and I'd been lucky enough to find it, and maybe it started that way. But somewhere it stopped being just that, and I didn't want to know it because, he paused. Because if it's just friendship, then I can't lose it. If it's something else, then there's something to risk. And I've already lost. He stopped again. He didn't finish that sentence. He didn't have to. She understood what he hadn't said. She understood what it cost him to stand in this kitchen and say this much. I am terrified, she said finally, of what happens if this goes wrong. So am I. We can't unknow each other. If it doesn't work, we can't go back. It doesn't work that way. I know. Lily, I know, he said again. I know. And then, quietly, I know all the things that could go wrong. I've thought about all of them. They don't change what's true. She looked at him, really looked at him, at the set of his jaw, the tiredness around his eyes that he never quite shook, even when things were going well, the way he was standing here telling her the truth, even though truth-telling was not the natural posture of a man who had built an entire professional life around controlled information. What is true? She asked. And Ethan, who chose his words carefully in every context of his life, who was known professionally for precision and reserve, said the thing without dressing it up. That you're already the center of it, my life. You've been there for 3 years, and I was just trying very hard not to know it. The rain, the lamp, the cold oregano in its small jar on the counter. Mia looked at the floor for a moment. Then she looked back up at him. Okay, she said. Soft. Not a grand admission, just an acknowledgement, a door cracking open. Okay? Okay, I hear you. She exhaled, and something in her release that had been held taut for a long time. I'm scared. I'm scared too. You don't look scared. I'm extremely scared. She almost smiled. The pasta's ruined. He glanced back at the stove. It was already ruined before you touched it. I had a chance to save it and I got distracted. That was my fault. Yeah, she said. It was. He reached out then, carefully, giving her every opportunity to step back, and took her hand. Just held it. She looked down at their hands and then back up at his face, and for a moment neither of them moved, like they were each waiting for something to arrive that told them what came next. What came next was not a dramatic declaration. What came next was not fireworks or certainty or the dissolving of every fear she'd named. What came next was Ethan raising an eyebrow and saying, in the quiet, careful voice of someone who was trying very hard not to smile, "The problem isn't that you called me future husband." She waited. It's that you added maybe. She laughed. It came out of her before she could catch it. Real laughter, startled and genuine, the kind that took her whole face. She pressed her free hand over her mouth, which did nothing to contain it, and standing there in his warm kitchen, with the pasta ruined and the rain still coming down, and every important, frightening, genuinely uncertain thing still exactly as uncertain as it had been 20 minutes ago, he kissed her. It wasn't like movie kisses. It was slower than that and quieter, and there was a moment in the middle of it where she was still laughing slightly and he was smiling against her mouth, which was awkward in a human way that somehow made it more real. When they stepped apart, both of them were a little unsteady. Mia looked at him. Something in his face had changed. Something loosened, some sustained holding back that she recognized because she'd been doing the same thing. I still have a lease, she said. 6 months left. Okay. And I'm not doing anything dramatic. I'm not quitting my job. I'm not asking you to. Good. She took a breath. Because this is She shook her head. I just want to know what this is before I know what it isn't. He nodded, and then, fair. They stood there for another moment, the rain, the lamp. We should probably eat something, she said. The pasta is... I saw bread. There's bread. Then we'll eat bread, she said, and you can tell me what Lily said about her rocks this week. He laughed, a real one, and she let go of his hand to open the cabinet where she knew the bread was kept, and he moved to get plates, and the kitchen was warm, and neither of them said anything profound. They didn't need to. The important things had been said. Everything else was just what came next. The bread was gone by 10 o'clock. They had eaten it at the kitchen counter, standing up, which was how people eat when sitting down would have made the moment too formal, when sitting down would have required acknowledging that something had shifted and they weren't quite ready to look directly at it yet. Mia had found cheese in the back of the refrigerator, and Ethan had located some leftover soup from 2 days ago that was fine when reheated, and they had assembled this mismatched dinner with the careful, slightly distracted energy of two people who were both thinking about something else and using the logistics of food to give their hands something to do. They talked. They always talked. This was never the problem between them. But the texture of the conversation that night was different in a way Mia kept noticing and couldn't quite name. Lighter, maybe. Or more careful. Like both of them were aware of a new arrangement of furniture in the room and were navigating around it without yet establishing where everything was going to live permanently. Ethan told her about Lily's rocks. He'd promised he would, and he did. A full account of the Tuesday afternoon when Lily had come home from school genuinely upset because a boy in her class had thrown a rock at another kid on the playground and gotten them all banned from bringing rocks to school, which Lily had experienced as a profound injustice targeting her specifically, even though she understood when pressed that she hadn't actually brought any rocks to school that day. The logic of the grievance was the logic of 7-year-olds, which was its own sovereign category. She wrote a formal complaint, Ethan said. Mia stopped chewing. She what? A formal complaint about the rock ban. She asked me how to spell arbitrary and discriminatory, and I helped her because I thought it was for something else, and then she showed me the finished document. He paused. It was addressed to the principal and her homeroom teacher, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, the Chicago Board of Education. Mia put her hand over her face. I didn't know whether to be proud or terrified, he said. Both, Mia said through her hand. That's both. That is exactly both, yes. They talked about Lily for a while longer, and then they talked about a restaurant Ethan had been to for a client dinner that he thought Mia would have opinions about, and she did. And the conversation moved the way it always moved between them, loose and associative, doubling back on itself. One thing leading to another thing that seemed unrelated until it suddenly wasn't. But underneath it, the whole time, was the knowledge of what had happened before the bread, the kiss, the things they'd said, the hands on the counter, the lamp, the rain. None of that had gone anywhere. It was just sitting there between them, not demanding immediate attention, but present in the same way that a decision you've made sits with you before you've told anyone else about it. Real, settled, and slightly terrifying. Ethan walked her out at 11:30. He got her coat from the entryway hook and held it open. An old-fashioned gesture she normally would have said something about, but tonight she just slipped her arms into it without commentary. He opened the front door and they stood on the porch together in the cold, looking out at the wet street. The rain had slowed to an intermittent mist that drifted more than fell. I'll get you a car, he said. It's fine. The bus. Mia. Ethan. A pause. Neither of them moving. It's late and it's raining, he said. Not a negotiation, just a statement. She looked at him for a moment. She could see him clearly in the porch light. The lines of tiredness in his face that she'd long stopped seeing as a deficit and had just started accepting as part of what he looked like. The careful way he was watching her now. The slight tension around his mouth that she recognized as the face he made when he was trying to not make a face. Fine, she said. He got the car. He stood on the porch until it arrived, which was 7 minutes because it was a Thursday night in November, and they were in Lincoln Park, not Logan Square. She got in. She looked back at him through the window. He raised one hand, a small wave, nothing dramatic, and then the car pulled away, and she faced forward and watched the wet street slide past. She didn't get out her phone, she didn't text Rachel, she didn't do anything at all for the 15-minute ride home, except look at the city through the window and think about the fact that the contact name was still there, in her phone, unchanged, and that when she'd looked at it tonight in his kitchen, she'd felt something she couldn't call a joke anymore. She didn't change the name when she got home. She didn't do anything. She sat on her couch in her coat for 5 minutes, an old habit, the decompression ritual, the sitting in the dark before turning on the lamp. And then she got up and brushed her teeth and went to bed. Her phone lit up at midnight when she was almost asleep. One text. Got home okay? She smiled at the ceiling. She typed back, I was the one in the car. He replied, I know, still asked. She put the phone face down on the nightstand. She lay in the dark for a while. Her apartment was quiet. The dog upstairs wasn't pacing tonight. And the mist tapped softly on the window, and she lay there with the weight of the evening on her chest like something warm and complicated. She fell asleep before she could overthink it into something she was afraid of again. That was a minor miracle. The morning, however, had no such grace to offer. She woke up at 7:15 to a shift that started at 9, and in the 10 seconds between opening her eyes and full consciousness, she had exactly that much peace before the previous night arrived in full. She lay there for a moment with the information. The bread and the soup, the lamp, his hand on hers, the kiss. The problem isn't that you called me future husband, it's that you added maybe. She pressed her palms against her face. What had she done? She sat up. She put her feet on the floor. She went through the functional motions of morning, coffee, shower, the deliberate construction of a human being capable of operating in the world, and she tried to be reasonable about the mess she'd made of her life in one rainy Thursday kitchen. The thing was, she knew herself. She knew how she operated. She was not a leap-first person. She was a calculated risk person, a person who mapped the exits before she walked into a room, who had learned through enough personal history that optimism was not the same as probability. And she had calculated many times that the probability of this going well was low enough to not attempt. And yet, she sat at her kitchen table with her coffee mug held in both hands. She always held it in both hands, a habit from winter mornings in the drafty apartment she'd had at 25. And she thought about the way he'd looked at her when he said she's already the center of it. She thought about the careful steadiness of it, the lack of performance in it. Ethan Cole in a meeting was all performance. Controlled, calibrated, presenting a version of himself designed to achieve a particular outcome. Ethan Cole in his own kitchen at 11 o'clock at night, after 5 years of proximity and one accidental revelation, had not been performing anything. That was what she kept returning to. He hadn't been smooth about it. He'd been halting in places. He'd stopped sentences and started them differently. He'd said I know 3 times in a row because he didn't have something better, and he was being honest instead of eloquent. Ethan could do eloquent. She'd watched him do it. Whatever had happened in that kitchen had not been eloquent. It had been true. She finished her coffee. She got dressed. She went to work. Harlow's at 9 in the morning was a specific kind of quiet. The restaurant not yet open for lunch. The kitchen doing its prep work. The low sound of commercial appliances and the back and forth of kitchen conversation drifting through the pass. She tied on her apron, checked the table assignments, and got through the morning on the automatic competence of someone who had done this long enough that it lived in her body without requiring her full attention. Rachel found her during the pre-lunch lull. You look like you either had a very good night or a very bad one, Rachel said, leaning against the service station counter. I'm fine. You have the face. What face? The thinking face. You've been doing it since you got here. Rachel reached past her for a stack of cocktail napkins. Does it have anything to do with a certain person whose name I know better than to say out loud? Mia was quiet for one moment too long. Rachel's eyes widened incrementally. Mia, don't. I'm not doing anything. You're making a face. You made a face first. Something happened, Mia said in a tone that was deliberately flat. I'm processing it. I don't want to talk about it here. Something happened, Rachel repeated slowly. Something happened. Rachel, I've been telling you for 2 years. Please don't. That this was, Rachel, I have a 6 top that seated early and I need to. I'm going to need the full story, Rachel said, pointing at her. At the end of this shift, every detail. There are no details. Mia, fine. Some details, after the shift. She grabbed her order pad. Stop smiling like that. Rachel was already smiling like that. Mia walked away before it could get worse. The shift was long. It was a Friday, which meant the lunch rush ran hot and late and bled into an early dinner hour, and she didn't have the cognitive space to think about anything beyond table management and order accuracy until nearly 4 o'clock. This was, she recognized, a mercy. Her brain was not a safe place to spend unstructured time right now. Her phone had been in her apron pocket all shift. She'd checked it twice during break. There was one text from Ethan, sent at 2:30, which was when he was usually between afternoon calls, that said, Lily got a response from the principal. And then, 2 minutes later, she's requested a follow-up meeting. Mia snorted out loud at the second text. Then she typed back, "She is absolutely your child." He replied, "I genuinely don't know how to feel about that." She replied, "Pride. It's pride. Let yourself feel it." It was normal. It was completely normal. It was what they always were with each other. The quick back and forth that had no stakes and was just the daily evidence of two people who existed in each other's lives. And it was exactly the same as it had always been, and also completely different, and she was not going to think about what it being different meant while she was standing in a restaurant with 4 tables needing her attention. She thought about it anyway. After the shift, Rachel extracted the story from her with the patient efficiency of someone who had been waiting a long time for it and was not going to let nerves or deflection get in the way. They sat in the break room with their shoes off, a post-shift ritual for both of them, and Mia gave her the broad outline, the phone, the contact name, his face when he saw the screen, the conversation in the kitchen, the bread, what he'd said about her already being the center of his life. Rachel was quiet through most of it, which was how she listened when something actually mattered. When Mia finished, Rachel picked up her coffee cup, found it empty, set it back down. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Terrified." "Of what specifically?" "Of the fact that it's real now. It was easier when it was just a thing I kept to myself." Mia looked at the ceiling. "When it was just mine, I could manage it. Now it's out there. And it has to be something or it has to not be something, and there's no neutral option anymore." Rachel nodded. "But do you want it to be something?" A very long pause. "Yes," Mia said, quietly, like it cost something to say. "Then you already know what this is," Rachel said. Mia looked at her. "That's it? That's the advice?" "What other advice is there?" "The practical kind. The kind that accounts for all the ways this could go completely wrong?" Rachel tilted her head. "Like what?" "Like, we've been friends for 5 years. That's not recoverable if this falls apart. Like, he has a daughter who is already attached to me and I am attached to her. And that is a catastrophic amount of emotional stakes for a relationship that doesn't even exist yet. Like," she stopped. This was the one she always came back to. "Like he lives in a house with original crown molding, and I still do the bell pepper math, Rachel. The gap between our lives is not a small thing." Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said something Mia hadn't expected. "Do you think he doesn't know that?" "What?" "Ethan, do you think he's unaware of the difference in your financial situations?" "I mean, obviously not, but so he knows. And he said what he said anyway." Rachel shrugged. "I'm not saying it's not complicated. I'm saying that particular complication is one he's already looked at and decided it doesn't change anything. That's his decision to make." Mia didn't answer. She was picking at the hem of her apron. "The bell pepper thing," Rachel said more gently. "That's you. That's your assessment of what you are and what you're worth. I don't think it's his." The break room was quiet. The sound of the kitchen winding down reached them from behind the door, the clatter and conversation gradually diminishing as the closing crew moved through their work. "I hate it when you're right," Mia said finally. Rachel picked up the empty coffee cup again, seemed to remember it was empty, and set it back down with resignation. "I know, it's a burden." She went home on the bus. It was fully dark by now. 6 o'clock in November was the full dark of a different season, the kind of darkness that arrived early and stayed long. She sat near the window with her coat pulled close and watched the lights of the city pass. Her phone buzzed. Not Ethan this time. Her sister, Jess. A Sunday call tradition broken mid-week, which meant something had either happened or Jess had sensed a disturbance in the universe with the particular sibling sonar she'd always had. Mia let it go to voicemail. She'd call back tomorrow. She wasn't ready to explain this twice in one day. She got home. She changed. She made eggs. which she could cook competently because eggs were forgiving and she didn't have to think. She ate at her kitchen table with her phone beside her, face up, and she looked at the contact name for a long moment. Future husband. Maybe. She put the phone down. She ate her eggs. She thought about Rachel's words. That's your assessment of what you are and what you're worth. And she sat with the discomfort of recognizing that a significant portion of her terror was not about Ethan at all. It was about herself, about the deep, stubborn conviction she carried, one she'd been carrying so long she'd stopped noticing its weight, that the version of herself who existed right now in this apartment, with this job and this lease and this careful budget, was not enough for the life she actually wanted, not enough for him. She washed her plate. She turned off the kitchen light. She sat on the couch and stared at the ceiling for a while, and she thought about the 7-year-old who had climbed into her lap 3 years ago and announced she smelled like cookies, and the way that small thing, that unprompted, fully convinced small thing, had meant something she hadn't allowed herself to name until now. The phone lit up at 8:15. You free Saturday? From Ethan. Lily's soccer game is at 10. She's been asking. She read it twice. She understood what she was being asked, not just to the game, but into something. The clarity of the invitation, the simplicity of it. Not a grand gesture, not a declaration, just come to the game she's been asking. Just, here is my actual life, the daily one, the messy one with soccer on Saturday mornings. Come be in it. She typed back, I'll be there. He replied immediately, she's going to tell you about the principal's situation in person. Be prepared. I am never prepared for your daughter, she typed back. Nobody is. A pause. Then, that's kind of the point. She set the phone down and looked at the room. Her careful small room with its double-duty surfaces and its back drawer notebook and its 3-year-old black dress hanging in the closet. And she felt something move through her that was not exactly peace and not exactly certainty, but was something adjacent to both. Something like the sensation of deciding. She still didn't know how this was going to go. She still couldn't run the calculus and get a comfortable answer. She still had a lease and a notebook with 47 pages of untouched plans and a bell pepper problem that wasn't going anywhere because someone had kissed her in a kitchen. But she was going to the soccer game on Saturday, and maybe that was enough to start with. Across the city, Ethan Cole was sitting in his home office at a desk that had papers on it he should have been reviewing for an hour. He had not reviewed them. He had reviewed them for a combined total of about 12 minutes and had spent the rest of the time in a particular kind of distracted stillness that his business partner would have found alarming and his therapist would have found encouraging. He'd handled difficult things his whole adult life. He'd walked into rooms where companies were dying and people were panicking and told them to stay calm and here's what we do next. He'd held Lily's hand in a hospital waiting room at 3 years old and explained that her mother wasn't coming home, and he'd held himself together for that conversation through something he still didn't fully understand, some deep reserves of composure that he would not have predicted he possessed. He had navigated years of grief and single parenthood and professional high stakes with a surface of steadiness that was mostly not actually a performance. It was a real thing he'd built out of necessity. He was not currently steady. He was sitting in his home office looking at a deal memo with a pen in his hand, and he kept reading the same paragraph because his brain kept skating off it and landing back on Mia's kitchen, which was not his kitchen, but which had been her territory in his house for 2 years. Her lamp, her preferred burner, her knowledge of where he kept the pasta strainer incorrectly. He thought about what she'd said. I didn't want to be someone who complicated your life because she'd convinced herself something could work that clearly couldn't. He understood that logic. He recognized it. It was the same logic he'd been applying from his own side for a different set of reasons. The friendship was too important to risk. The friendship was already everything. Why reach for something when what you had was already more than most people managed to build? The problem with that logic, he'd realized somewhere around the 3rd year, was that it required you to keep performing a version of what you were that you'd already outgrown. And performance, sustained long enough, stopped being protection and started being just plain exhausting. He put the pen down. He thought about Saturday. The game, Lily, the look on Mia's face when Lily said something incomprehensible and 7-year-old, and Mia laughed the real laugh, the one that was different from her professional warmth and her social charm, and was just her, fully, momentarily unguarded. He picked the pen back up. He reviewed the deal memo. Slowly, and not particularly efficiently, but he got through it. It was progress. Saturday arrived with the specific aggressive brightness of a late November day that had decided to be clear as compensation for the past week of gray. Cold, genuinely cold, the kind that turned breath visible and made the grass on the soccer field crunch slightly underfoot, but lit up and sharp-edged in the way that made Chicago beautiful for exactly the people who could tolerate it. Mia arrived at the field at 9:50 in jeans and boots and a coat she'd bought 2 years ago that was warm enough and not particularly stylish, and she found Ethan on the sideline already with a travel mug of coffee and a slightly harassed expression that meant Lily had been difficult about something in the car. Lily herself was visible across the field with her team. 7-year-olds in oversized yellow jerseys, warming up with the chaotic energy of small people who had been told to run in a direction and had interpreted this instruction loosely. "She refused to eat breakfast," Ethan said, by way of greeting. "Why?" "She said she performs better on an empty stomach." "Where did she hear that?" "Here." "I have no idea. She said it like she read it somewhere, but she can't read chapter books yet, so I genuinely don't know." He handed her the coffee mug without discussion. She took it without discussion. This was an established fact between them. She arrived places cold, and he always had coffee, and she always stole some of it, and neither of them had ever named this arrangement out loud. "Did you tell her that's not how it works?" "I tried. She informed me she was the one playing soccer today, not me." Mia looked across the field at the small, yellow-jerseyed figure. "She's not wrong. She's absolutely wrong. She's just 7 and confident, which is different." "You love it." He said nothing, which was confirmation. Lily spotted Mia approximately 45 seconds later and changed course from whatever warm-up drill she'd been nominally participating in with zero hesitation. She came across the field at a run, which caused her coach to call her name in mild protest. "MIA!" She arrived at full speed, and the hug was the full-body contact version, arms and momentum together. Mia caught her, which required a certain amount of bracing. "Hey, Bug, I have to tell you about the principal." Lily stepped back and her face took on the expression she wore for important information. Very serious, slightly offended on behalf of justice. She said the rock ban was a school safety policy and she appreciated my concerns. "That sounds reasonable," Mia said carefully. Lily looked at her with the specific expression of someone hearing an unacceptable take. She didn't address my second point. "What was your second point?" "That the ban was applied retroactively to people who had never done anything wrong." There was a pause. Mia glanced at Ethan. Ethan was looking somewhere else with the particular studied innocence of a man who had already had this conversation and made his position known and was staying out of this round. "That's a really good point," Mia said. Lily nodded. "I requested a follow-up meeting." "Your dad mentioned." "She hasn't responded yet." A pause. "I'm giving her until Monday." "And then?" Lily considered this with genuine 7-year-old gravity. "I'll write a second letter." "Lily," her coach called from across the field. "We're starting." She turned immediately. The switch from formal grievance mode to soccer mode was instant and total. "Watch me score," she told Mia, and then she was off at a run, yellow jersey flapping. Mia turned to Ethan. He was watching his daughter go with an expression he didn't fully control when he wasn't paying attention to controlling it. Something open and unguarded and complicated in the way that loving small people who are simultaneously yourself and completely not yourself was always complicated. "She's going to be a lawyer," Mia said. "I know." "Or a senator." "I know," he said again. Something in his voice was rueful and proud in equal measure. They stood on the sideline and watched the game. Lily's team played the way 7-year-olds play soccer, in a moving cluster that tracked the ball like a single organism, individual positions dissolving and reforming, the tactical structure the coach had presumably attempted to convey, visible only in fragments. Lily was fast and competitive and not particularly concerned with the official rules of the game when she felt the official rules of the game were suboptimal. She did not score, but she did have 2 close moments and 1 instance of celebrating someone else's goal with equal energy to what she would have given her own. At halftime, Ethan and Mia stood together while Lily's team clustered around their coach. The morning had warmed slightly, not much, but enough to make standing outside bearable, Especially with the coffee Ethan had produced a second travel mug of at some point, which Mia was now holding. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said. She looked over at him. "You're going to ask anyway. I want to ask first this time." "Then ask." He was quiet for a moment, eyes still on the field. "Are you okay?" "With—" He stopped, started again. "With how things are. Right now. I'm not trying to push anything. I just want to know you're okay." She thought about Rachel in the break room. She thought about sitting on her couch looking at the ceiling. She thought about the 47 pages in the drawer notebook and the bell pepper math, and all the calculations she'd run, and the way none of them had produced the outcome she'd been managing toward. "I'm scared," she said. He turned to look at her. "But I'm okay," she added. "Those are different things." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded, once, and turned back to the field. "That's honest," he said. "I'm trying it out." Something at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile yet. "Looks good on you." "Don't push it." "I'm not pushing anything. You said so yourself." "I said you said so." "Close enough." And on the field, a whistle blew, and Lily's team surged back into formation, and Mia handed him back the coffee mug, and they stood together in the cold, clear morning watching a 7-year-old who had formally protested a rock ban pursue a soccer ball with the absolute conviction that the universe was organized around her particular path to victory. It was not a perfect morning. Mia's boots were not warm enough for this sustained outdoor exposure, and her toes were getting numb. Ethan's second coffee had gone cold. A kid on the opposing team scored twice in the second half, and Lily was vocal about this in ways that required her coach's gentle intervention. The parking situation afterward was a minor disaster involving a badly parked SUV that had everyone shuffling. But walking back to Ethan's car with Lily between them, Lily holding both their hands, chattering about the second half with the unself-conscious certainty of someone who had already processed the loss and reorganized it into a narrative where she had performed well regardless, Mia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, exactly. Something quieter and more durable than happiness. Just, this is real. And I am here. And I'm choosing to be here. Lily was explaining a new development in the rock situation. Apparently another child had approached her at recess with solidarity and a smooth gray stone as a symbol of support. And Ethan was listening with the attentive patience he always brought to his daughter's world, asking questions that were real questions, not the condescending simplifications adults often used. Mia looked at him over Lily's head. He caught her looking. He didn't say anything. She didn't either. It was just a moment, a half-second of contact, unperformed, nothing to read into except exactly what it was, which was two people on a parking lot in November who had stopped pretending to each other. Then Lily said something about the stone being sedimentary and looked up at both of them for a reaction. And the moment passed, and Mia said, "How do you know what sedimentary means?" And Lily said, "I know lots of things," with a serenity that was frankly impressive. "She's right," Ethan said. "She does." "Stop encouraging her," Mia said. "I'm not encouraging her. I'm confirming a fact." "That's the same as encouraging her." Semantics. Lily watched this exchange with visible satisfaction, the way she always did when they bickered mildly. The expression of a small person who had correctly identified that this was not real conflict and was actually something else, even if she didn't have the vocabulary for what. She was 7. She had time. They all did. 3 weeks passed. Not quietly. Nothing in either of their lives moved quietly, but without the kind of dramatic forward motion that the Thursday kitchen might have implied was imminent. They didn't have a conversation where they defined what was happening. They didn't sit down and map out expectations or establish language for the thing that existed between them now. This was partly because neither of them was naturally inclined toward that kind of explicit emotional architecture, and partly because the thing between them was still new enough that naming it too precisely felt like handling something fragile before it had fully set. What they did instead was what they'd always done. They existed in each other's lives, but now with the particular awareness of people who had stopped pretending about why. Mia still came over on Tuesdays because Tuesday had been their standing night for 3 years, and there was no reason to change that. Ethan still texted her about Lily, still called on the drive home when a deal was going badly, and he needed someone to talk to who wouldn't ask him about the deal. Lily still treated Mia's presence as a completely natural feature of the world, the way children treat things that have always been true. But there were differences. Small ones, the kind that wouldn't have registered to anyone not paying close attention. He remembered on a Wednesday night that she'd mentioned her heating had been unreliable again. He didn't say anything to her about it directly. He knew she'd push back, had watched her push back on every offered help that felt too large. But he texted her landlord's name and said, "I know a contractor who's done HVAC work in buildings like yours, wants nothing for the consultation, if you want the number." She had looked at that text for a full minute before typing back, "Send it." He sent it. She called the contractor. The heating got fixed in 4 days, which was about 5 weeks faster than it would have happened through the landlord alone. And she didn't ask Ethan how much it had actually cost because some things were better left unexamined. She showed up at his office on a Thursday with lunch, unannounced, which she never did, because he'd mentioned in passing the night before that he had back-to-back meetings until 7 and had forgotten to eat. His assistant Marcus, who had worked with Ethan for 4 years and possessed an excellent read on the terrain of his boss's life, held the bags for her while she signed in at the front desk and said, without any particular inflection, "I'll let him know you're here." The expression on Marcus's face was the expression of a man adding a piece of information to an internal file he'd been maintaining for some time. Ethan came out of a meeting 7 minutes early, which was something he essentially never did. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I was nearby." She wasn't nearby. Lincoln Park to Wacker Drive was 25 minutes on the bus. "I got the soup from that place on Randolph you like." He looked at the bags. He looked at her. Something moved through his face that he didn't fully suppress. "Thank you. Don't make it weird." "I'm not making it weird. You're doing the face." "I don't have a face." "You have several faces and you're doing one of them right now." She handed him the bags. "Eat. I'm going back." She turned to leave. He said her name. She turned back. He was just looking at her. The 41st floor atrium, glass and clean lines, and the professional hum of a building full of people with places to be, and Ethan Cole standing there with a paper bag of soup, looking at her the way he did when he had something to say and was deciding how much of it to say. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Thank you." She held his gaze for 1 beat, 2. "You're welcome," she said, and turned and walked back to the elevator and was almost certain he watched her go. She told herself this didn't mean anything particular on the bus home and was not entirely convincing. The complications arrived the way complications always do. Not all at once, but in accumulation. The first was Ethan's mother. Margaret Cole was a 71-year-old woman who had spent 40 years married to a civil engineer and had subsequently transferred the organizational precision of an engineering household onto everything else in her life, including her 2 children, her 4 grandchildren, and her careful opinions about who should be in their lives. She loved Ethan with the specific ferocity of a woman who had watched her son lose his wife and raise a daughter alone, and had never fully forgiven the universe for the arrangement, even while she deeply admired how he'd managed it. She had met Mia 3 times over the years. At Ethan's birthday dinner 2 years ago, at Lily's school spring concert last May, and at a casual family lunch that Ethan had been unclear about whether Mia being there was deliberate or incidental. Margaret had been cordial each time, warm even. But there was a quality to her warmth that Mia had noticed without being able to fully categorize, something assessing in it, a careful attention that went slightly beyond social pleasantry. She got the call on a Wednesday morning, which was strange because Ethan's mother had never called her directly. She had Mia's number. They'd exchanged it once for logistics purposes, but in 3 years she'd never used it. "Mia." Margaret's voice on the phone was measured and pleasant, and somehow also a clear indication that pleasantness was a choice she was making, not a default. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "No, I'm not in until noon today." She was standing in her kitchen in socks. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine. I wanted to speak with you about Ethan." A pause calibrated to let this land without being dramatic. "I've noticed some changes in the last few weeks. He seems different. Lighter, maybe, is the word. I asked him if something had happened, and he said nothing significant, which is how Ethan says that something significant has happened." Mia was quiet. She was very carefully quiet. "I'm not asking you to tell me what's between you," Margaret said. "That's not my business, and Ethan would correctly tell me it's not my business. I'm calling because I want to say something, and I thought it was better to say it directly to you rather than through him. Okay, Mia said. I've watched you with my son for 3 years. I've watched you with my granddaughter. I've watched how Ethan is when you're in the room, which is different from how he is with other people, has always been different, and I want you to know I see that. A pause. I also want you to know that whatever you're worrying about, and I can tell from how you just went quiet that you're worrying about something, it's not what you think it is. Mia sat down on the kitchen chair. Mrs. Cole. Margaret, please. Her voice had shifted slightly, less calibrated, more direct. Ethan has been alone for 4 years. Not just as a single parent, genuinely alone in the way that matters. He has people who care about him, and I'm one of them, and I haven't been able to touch the part of him that's been locked up since Claire. You have. A beat. I don't say that lightly. There was a silence that Mia didn't quite know how to fill. I'm not trying to put pressure on you, Margaret continued. I'm trying to tell you that from where I'm standing, you already belong in this family. You have for a while. The rest is details. Mia stared at the surface of her kitchen table. The grain of the wood, the small coffee ring stain she'd never fully removed. Thank you, she said finally. Her voice was slightly less steady than she would have liked. That means, I appreciate you saying that. Don't thank me. Just don't let yourself get in your own way. Another pause, and then something that might have been a smile entering her voice. Also, Lily told me you're helping her draft a follow-up letter to the principal. I want you to know that I consider that genuinely above and beyond. Mia laughed, surprised out of it. She ambushed me with the draft. She ambushes everyone. She learned it from her father. A dry beat. He did the same thing to board members for 3 years before I recognized the pattern. After she hung up, Mia sat at the table for a long time. The kitchen was quiet. The heating worked now. She looked at her phone, not at any specific notification, just at the screen, the familiar architecture of it. She thought about what Margaret had said. You already belong in this family. She thought about how much she'd wanted to dismiss the words as kindness, the reflexive move, the self-protective one, and how she hadn't been able to. They had landed somewhere that deflection didn't reach. She called her sister Jess at noon before she went into work, because she'd been putting it off for 2 weeks and it was becoming conspicuous. Jess, to her credit, let Mia finish the whole story before she said anything. This was not Jess's natural mode. Jess's natural mode was to identify the point and respond to it, which made her an excellent project manager and a slightly exhausting person to process things with. But she held the impulse in check. When Mia finished, there was a brief silence. So let me get this straight, Jess said. He told you you're the center of his life. More or less. And he kissed you? Yes. And you went to his daughter's soccer game? Yes. And his mother called you? Yes. Mia. A pause. What exactly are you waiting for? I'm not waiting for anything. I'm being careful. You're being you. What does that mean? It means, Jess said, with the careful directness of someone who had been practicing this specific conversation in her head for years, that when something good is right in front of you, you find reasons to audit it. You go looking for the structural flaws. You run the numbers until you can prove it doesn't add up, and then you use that as permission to not take the risk. The kitchen, the window, the heating that worked now. That's not what I'm doing, Mia said. It's a little bit what you're doing. She didn't answer. He's not a risk calculation, Jess said more gently. He's a person who has been in love with you for what sounds like years, who knows exactly what your life looks like, and who kissed you in his kitchen while the pasta was burning. That's not a spreadsheet problem. A pause. That's just life. You have to just live it sometimes. Mia went to work. She moved through the shift on competence and muscle memory the way she always did when her head was somewhere else entirely. She took orders and remembered modifications and refilled coffee and smiled at tables with the warm professionalism she'd spent 6 years developing, and underneath all of it, she was turning her sister's words over like the rocks in Lily's collection, looking at the weight of them, the texture. You have to just live it sometimes. The second complication arrived 4 days later, which was Ethan's business partner, Daniel Park. Daniel had been Ethan's partner at Cole Capital for 5 years. He was 40, sharp-minded, and possessed of an absolute absence of sentimentality that made him extremely effective in his professional life and occasionally difficult to have a personal conversation with. He and Ethan had the particular dynamic of two people who had been through enough together that the relationship had its own grammar, its own shorthand, its own understood limits. He also knew Ethan better than almost anyone, which was why, on a Thursday morning over coffee before their 8 o'clock meeting, he looked across his desk and said, without preamble, "What's happening with Mia?" Ethan looked up from his copy of the meeting materials. "What? You've been distracted for 3 weeks. Not in a bad way. Actually, you've been oddly easier to work with, which I find suspicious. And you mentioned her twice yesterday in contexts that didn't require mentioning her." Daniel held his coffee mug in both hands with the equanimity of a man who had no intention of pretending this conversation wasn't happening. "So, what's happening?" "Nothing that affects the fund." "I didn't ask about the fund, I asked about you." A pause. Ethan sat back. This was the particular discomfort of being known by someone, the way it removed the option of performing fine when you weren't fine, or performing normal when normal had shifted. "Something changed," he said finally. Not a full disclosure, just the minimum honest answer. Daniel looked at him. "Something you want to change back?" "No?" "Then what's the problem?" "I didn't say there was a problem." "You're sitting there like there's a problem." Ethan set down the meeting materials. He looked at his partner, at the practical, unsentimental face of a man waiting for actual information with the patience of someone who had sat through enough long silences in negotiating rooms that he could wait out almost anything. "She's scared," Ethan said, "of the gap between our lives. She has it in her head that it's a reason for this not to work." "Is she wrong that the gap exists?" "No, the gap exists. But you don't think it's a reason." "I think it's a complication. I don't think it's a reason." Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering this with the same attention he brought to deal analysis. "You've been her friend for 5 years. You know her." "Yes." "And you're telling me that after 5 years of knowing her, you think the gap is surmountable." "I think the gap is irrelevant to the actual question. The actual question is whether she trusts that I see her clearly. Not the resume. Her." Ethan picked up his coffee. "She spent a long time convincing herself that the version of herself she is right now, the one with the double shifts and the tight budget, is the version that other people see when they look at her, and it's not the version I see. But I can't just tell her that. She has to get there." Daniel was quiet. "So you're waiting," he said. "I'm not waiting. I'm present. I'm showing up. I'm not pushing." He paused. "She'll get there or she won't, but I'm not going to make her feel like there's a deadline." His partner looked at him for a moment with an expression that was, from Daniel Park, about as close to warmth as it got. "You know, this is the first time in 4 years I've heard you talk about a relationship like it's something you actually want to be in." "I know. Not like an obligation. Not like something you're doing correctly." A pause. "Like something you want." Ethan said nothing. He picked up the meeting materials again. "I want the meeting notes by 6, Daniel said, and picked up his phone, and the conversation was over. But it stayed with Ethan, all day, in the margins of the work, between the 9:30 call and the 11 o'clock meeting, during the 20-minute block where he was supposed to be reviewing term sheets, and was instead looking at the Chicago skyline through the window. It stayed with him. The first time you've talked about a relationship like it's something you actually want. He'd been a careful man since Claire, careful about what he allowed himself to want, careful about the difference between what was good for Lily and what was good for him, and careful about how often those two calculations pointed in the same direction. He had built his life around care and correctness and the performance of stability, because stability was what Lily needed, and Lily was the organizing principle of everything. But here was the thing he hadn't let himself look at directly until Daniel said it plainly. He wanted this. Not because it was good for Lily, though Lily's reaction to Mia had always been the clearest data point in the room. Not because it was logical or sensible or the right next step. He wanted it the way you wanted things before you learned to always ask permission of your own fear first. He texted Mia at 3:15. Not about Lily, not about anything practical. Just, "What are you doing Thursday night?" She replied 20 minutes later, which meant she was probably mid-shift, working till 8. "Why?" He typed, I want to take you somewhere, not just my kitchen. There was a longer pause this time. He could feel the weight of it, the way she was sitting with the text, turning it over, running the thing she always ran. Then, okay, one word. But for Mia, in this context, he understood exactly how much it carried. Thursday came with the indifferent punctuality of time, which does not adjust its arrival for people who are nervous. Mia spent an unreasonable amount of time that morning thinking about what to wear, which annoyed her because she was not someone who spent an unreasonable amount of time thinking about what to wear. She had a functional wardrobe organized around her actual life: work clothes, casual clothes, the black dress for events, and the overlap between these categories and whatever Thursday night was going to require was not immediately clear. She called Rachel during her break at noon. "I need advice." "That sentence from you is a gift," Rachel said. "Don't. What do you wear when someone wants to take you somewhere but doesn't tell you where?" "Depends on the someone." "Ethan." "Then somewhere nice, but not formal. He's going to pick somewhere that matters to him, not somewhere to impress you." Rachel thought for a moment. "The dark jeans, the burgundy top you have, the nice boots, not the work ones." "The burgundy is too—" "It's exactly right. You look good in it. It feels like I'm trying." "You are trying. That's allowed." She wore the burgundy top. He picked her up at 8:30, which was the logistical accommodation of her shift schedule, and which he'd offered without any implication that it was inconvenient. She came down to the street and he was leaning against the car, not inside it, but out in the cold, leaning against the driver's side with his hands in his coat pockets. And he looked at her when she came through the building door with an expression she was learning to let herself read accurately. "You look nice," he said. "You said that like you're surprised." "I said it like I mean it." She got in the car. He got in the car. "Where are we going?" "You'll see." "Ethan." 5 minutes. It was not 5 minutes. It was 12 minutes, which took them south and slightly east to a neighborhood she knew but didn't know well, and to a restaurant on a corner that had the particular modest exterior of a place that understood it didn't need to announce itself, a place that existed for people who already knew about it. Inside, small, warm, the lighting at the level where you could see the person you were with, but the rest of the room was soft. A bar along one wall, tables that were close but not cramped, a menu on a chalkboard that changed with whatever was available, which was the detail that told you the kitchen was the point. The host knew Ethan by name, not with the obsequious energy of someone who knew him by reputation, with the easy recognition of someone who'd seen him before in a context that had nothing to do with business. "Your usual table, Mr. Cole?" They were seated at a corner table by the window. The street outside was quiet. A few people walking, the glow of other establishments, the city doing its ordinary evening things. She looked around the room. "How long have you been coming here?" 3 years. Since the month after Claire died. He said it simply, without the careful management he sometimes applied to mentions of Claire. "I needed somewhere that felt, I don't know, human. I'd been in a lot of very professional rooms, and I needed somewhere that wasn't that." She looked at him. "You never told me about this place." "No." A pause. "I kept it for myself. I don't bring people here." He looked at the menu, which she understood was not because he needed to read it. "I wanted you to see it." The weight of that sat between them gently. She picked up her own menu and looked at it for a real minute, reading the words and letting them ground her in the immediate. The handwriting on the chalkboard, the description of a mushroom dish she thought she wanted, the small and functional reality of an evening that was just 2 people at a table. "The mushroom thing," she said. "Good choice. The pasta here is also good. Unlike some pasta I've encountered recently." He looked up from his menu. The corner of his mouth moved. "I've been working on it." "Have you?" "Marginally." "That tracks. The dinner was good. The food was the kind of cooking that didn't perform. It just delivered, course after course, with the confidence of a kitchen that knew what it was doing and didn't need to explain itself." They talked the way they always talked, but with something different in the quality of attention. Both of them more present than usual, more careful, in the way you were careful with things that mattered. She told him about Jess's call, not the full transcript, the general shape of it, what her sister had said, the thing about auditing good things until you could prove they didn't add up. She told him because it felt dishonest not to, and because one of the things she'd decided in the last 3 weeks was that honesty was the thing she owed this, if she owed it anything. He listened. He didn't jump to reassure her. He waited until she was done, and then he said, "Is she right?" "Yes," Mia said. No hedging. "Mostly." "Which part isn't right?" She thought about it. "The part where she makes it sound easy. It's not a decision you make once. It's not like I say I'm in, and then I'm just in and everything is fine. I have to keep deciding. Every time I run the numbers and they scare me, I have to decide again." He was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, a couple walked past under the yellow light of a street lamp, close together against the cold. "I know," he said. "You know, I have to decide too. Every day." He turned his wine glass slightly on the table. A small motion, the kind that meant he was choosing his words. I'm not standing here on solid ground telling you to jump. I'm also on uncertain ground. I've been on uncertain ground for 4 years. He looked at her. "I'd rather be on uncertain ground with you than stable ground alone." She looked at him across the table, the small lamp, the chalkboard menu, the warm, human room he'd kept for himself for 3 years. "That was almost poetic," she said. "Don't tell anyone. It would ruin my reputation." She laughed. He smiled, the real one. The one he didn't manufacture for rooms, the one that reached all the way up. After dinner, they walked, not with a destination, just along the street, hands in their own pockets at first, and then not. He reached for her hand somewhere around the second block, not dramatically, just reached, and she let him, and they walked the rest of the block like that in the cold, which was the kind of cold that sharpened everything, made every sensation clear. They stopped at a corner waiting for a light. "Your mother called me," she said. He turned to look at her. "She did what?" 2 weeks ago. She called me directly." A beat. "What did she say?" "She told me not to get in my own way." A pause. "And she said I already belong in the family, which is, I didn't know what to do with that." He was looking at her with an expression she'd never quite seen before. Something caught off guard, but not uncomfortably. Something that had been reached by unexpected means. "She's right," he said. "You do." The light changed. They crossed. His hand was still in hers, and she didn't let go, which was its own kind of answer to a question neither of them had asked out loud yet. They stood outside her building at 11 o'clock. The street was quiet. Her building's lobby light cast a warm yellow across the sidewalk. "I should go in," she said. "Not moving to go in." "Yeah. I have an early shift." "I know." A beat. 2. "Ethan." She looked at him. "I'm still scared." "I know. But She stopped. She started differently, the way he did when the first approach wasn't quite honest enough. "I'm choosing this. I want you to know that. I'm not just letting it happen to me. I'm choosing it." Something settled in his face. Not relief exactly, something quieter. Like a held breath finally. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said back. He leaned down and kissed her, brief, warm, unhurried, the way you kissed someone when you weren't performing it, when it was just the thing you did at the end of an evening that mattered. When he stepped back, she could see his breath in the cold air. "Go inside," he said. "It's freezing." "It really is." She didn't move for one more second. "Thank you. For tonight." "Yeah." She turned and went inside. She pressed the elevator button without looking back, because if she looked back, she'd stand there another 5 minutes, and she had an early shift, and she was cold, and she was already more transparent than she'd ever planned to be, and that was enough for one evening. The elevator doors closed. She looked at herself in the mirrored panel, burgundy top, good boots, cold flushed cheeks, and thought about what she'd said on the sidewalk. "I'm choosing this." She'd said it out loud. To him. Without the hedge, without the qualifier, without the careful statistical disclaimer. She'd just said it, and the sky hadn't fallen. She pulled her phone out of her pocket in the elevator. His contact name looked back at her from the screen where she'd bumped it open without thinking. Future husband. Maybe. The elevator reached the 3rd floor. The doors opened. She walked to her apartment, unlocked the door, went inside. She stood in the hall for a moment in the dark. Old habit, the decompression minute. And then she turned on the lamp. She sat on the couch. She looked at the phone in her hand. She opened his contact. She looked at the name for a long time. She did not change it, not yet. But for the first time, the maybe felt less like a protection and more like a door she was standing in front of. Still closed, but not locked. The difference between a door that's locked and a door you just haven't opened yet is not the door. It was never the door. It was always just a matter of reaching for the handle. December arrived the way it always did in Chicago, without apology. The city shifted into its winter mode, the lake wind acquiring a particular cutting quality that residents described to newcomers as character building, the streets taking on that specific gray-white palette of salt and cloud and early dark, the holiday lights strung along Michigan Avenue creating the impression of warmth while the actual temperature disagreed entirely. It was the kind of month that tested people, the kind that revealed what was actually durable. For the first 2 weeks of December, things between Ethan and Mia moved with a careful, tentative momentum. The way new things move when both people involved are experienced enough to know that speed and carelessness are the same thing. They had dinner twice more. He took her to a concert she'd mentioned months ago and forgotten about, and when she asked how he remembered, he said he'd put it in his calendar when she mentioned it, which was the kind of thing that would have sounded calculated from someone else, and from him was just the way he listened. Like he kept things. She found this both disarming and slightly terrifying. It meant she was being held carefully. And being held carefully, when you'd spent years managing yourself alone, was its own kind of exposure. Lily remained magnificently oblivious to the specific nature of what was changing, in the way 7-year-olds were oblivious to things that existed outside their immediate experiential radius. What she registered was simpler. Mia was around more, and this was correct, and she had opinions about it in the form of suggestions. She told Mia once, completely unprompted, that she thought the guest room should be repainted because the current color, a builder's beige that Ethan had never gotten around to addressing, was, in her assessment, depressing. When Mia pointed out that it wasn't her guest room, Lily looked at her with the patient expression of someone explaining something obvious to a person who is being slow about it. "Not yet," she said. Mia had stood in the hallway for a full second after that, not knowing whether to laugh or be alarmed by the precision of a 7-year-old's read on the situation. She told Ethan about it later. He rubbed his face with both hands. A gesture she'd learned meant he was processing something that was equal parts funny and genuinely complicated. "I'll talk to her," he said. "Don't make it weird." "How do I not make it weird?" "I genuinely don't know. She's your kid. She's too observant." "She's exactly as observant as you are. You just didn't realize you were raising a small version of yourself until the small version started noticing things you weren't ready for her to notice." He looked at her. "That's very accurate, and I don't appreciate it." She smiled. "I know." Things were good, not perfect. Good. With the texture of something real, which meant it had friction in it, and uncertainty in it, and moments where Mia drove home on the bus at night and sat in the dark for the usual minute and thought about all the ways this could still go sideways. But it was good. She was choosing it, every day, the way she told him she was choosing it. And most days, the choice felt less like a gamble and more like the obvious thing. Then, 8 days before Christmas, everything fractured. It started with a phone call Ethan didn't tell her about. She found out the way she found out about most things she wasn't supposed to find out. Sideways, through a gap in information that revealed the shape of something by its absence. She'd been at his house on a Tuesday, the standing night, and Lily was already asleep, and they were watching something neither of them was particularly invested in when his phone buzzed on the coffee table. She saw the screen from where she was sitting. Not snooping, just proximate. The name on the screen was a woman's name, Vanessa Cho. He looked at the phone. He didn't pick it up. He silenced it with the practiced motion of someone who had been expecting this call to be inconvenient and had been right. She would have let it go. She was not a jealous person by nature. Jealousy required a certain sense of ownership she hadn't yet let herself fully claim. And she trusted Ethan in the basic foundational way that came from having known someone through 5 years of actual daily life. But something in his face when he silenced the phone, a particular closing off, a subtle shift to guarded, caught her attention and held it. She didn't say anything that night, but she thought about it on the bus home. She thought about it in the particular way she thought about things she was trying not to make too large, circling it, approaching it, and retreating, building a profile of the thing from the outside. She found out 3 days later, and not from him. Rachel, who had a coworker whose sister worked in the same professional orbit as certain Chicago venture capital people, in the way that the city's professional world was always smaller than it appeared, mentioned it without realizing it was significant. A woman named Vanessa Cho had apparently been quite publicly linked to Ethan Cole earlier that year. Not a long relationship, a few months before the spring, ending without drama. The kind of connection that left behind no wreckage, but also left behind the people themselves, still existing in the same city, occasionally crossing paths. She's apparently back in Chicago from a year in New York, Rachel said, with the neutrality of someone sharing information whose significance she hadn't yet assessed. She had some event in the city last week. She stopped when she saw Mia's face. What? Rachel said. Nothing. Mia picked up her coffee. It's nothing. Mia, it's fine, She stopped. The honest thing, the thing she'd been practicing. I just wish he'd told me. There was a beat of silence. Have you told him you know? Rachel asked. No. Are you going to? I don't know how to. She said it plainly, without drama. We haven't established the language for that yet. I don't know what I'm allowed to ask about. I don't know what this is enough to know what I'm entitled to. Rachel looked at her steadily. You're entitled to the truth. That's baseline. That's not about what stage you're at. She knew Rachel was right. She also knew that the conversation she needed to have with Ethan was one that required her to be more vulnerable than she was currently comfortable being. To say, plainly, I noticed something, and it scared me, and I need to know you'll tell me the things that matter. That was not a calculus problem. That was just fear, sitting in the open, requiring her to not manage it alone. She called him that evening, not texted. Called because some things lost too much in text. He answered on the second ring, the way he always did when it was her. Hey. His voice had the particular quality it got when he was somewhere quiet and could actually talk. What's up? She took a breath. Can I ask you something? A pause. Brief, but she'd learned to read the gradations of his pauses. This one was the kind that meant he already knew or suspected what was coming. Yeah, Vanessa Cho called you Tuesday night. The silence this time was longer. Yes, he said. You didn't tell me. No. Why? Another pause. She could hear him exhale, not dramatically, just actually, the sound of someone who was deciding to be honest rather than careful. Because I didn't know how to bring it up without it sounding like something it isn't, and I didn't want to. He stopped, started differently. I was going to tell you, I just hadn't figured out the right way yet. Ethan? Her voice was steady. She was keeping it steady deliberately. What is it? She's in Chicago for the holidays. She reached out. She wanted to have coffee, just to catch up, she said. A pause. I haven't responded. Are you going to? I don't know. Then quickly. Not in the way you're thinking. I'm not thinking anything specific. I'm asking because... She stopped. The honest thing. Because you silenced the call instead of just letting it go to voicemail. And your face did something when you saw her name. And I've been trying to not make it into something for 3 days, and I can't anymore. A long silence. Mia. His voice was different now, lower. The professional composure was entirely gone. This was just him, unshielded. She and I... It was earlier this year, before anything happened between us. It wasn't serious. It ended because I wasn't capable of being present in it, and she was right to call it. I know. You know? I heard from someone. Not from you, which is the part I'm stuck on. Another silence. This one she couldn't read as cleanly. I should have told you, he said. Yes, I was handling it badly. I was trying to keep it from being a thing, and in doing that, I made it a thing. The slight roughness in his voice was something she'd heard before only rarely. When he talked about Claire, when he talked about the hard months after. I'm sorry. She sat on her couch. The lamp was on. The heating hummed steadily. She was very aware, in this moment, of the specific texture of what she was doing. Not running the numbers, not auditing, not looking for the structural flaw. just sitting with the discomfort of two people who were figuring out how to be honest with each other in real time, which was messy and imperfect and exactly as necessary as it was uncomfortable. "I don't think you owe me a report on every part of your history," she said. "That's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking, when something happens that touches on us, I need you to tell me, not manage it before I can see it. Tell me." "Yes." No qualification. "You're right. I will." "Okay." "Okay." "Yes." "Okay." She exhaled. I'm not ending anything over a silenced phone call, Ethan. I just needed you to know I noticed, and I needed to hear you actually say it." "I'm saying it." "I know." A pause that was different from the others. Something in it settling, the way a room settles after a window is closed against the cold. "I'm not going to have coffee with her," he said. "That's your decision. I'm not asking you to manage your life around me." "I know you're not asking. I'm telling you because it's the truth. There's nothing there. There hasn't been for a long time. Longer than I was honest with myself about, probably." A beat. "I was already somewhere else. I just didn't know how to say where." She looked at the ceiling. She thought about what Rachel said. Baseline is truth. She thought about what Jess said. You just have to live it sometimes. She thought about standing outside her building in the cold 2 weeks ago, saying, "I'm choosing this," and meaning it again right now, even though the choosing felt more effortful tonight than it had then. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "Thank you for asking instead of just—" He stopped. "Instead of just what? Instead of just deciding what it meant without asking me." "I almost did," she said honestly. "I had 3 days of deciding what it meant before I called you." "What did you decide?" "Several things. None of them were right." A sound that might have been a short, relieved laugh. "Okay. We should probably get better at this," she said. "At what specifically?" "At saying the hard things before they become bigger than they need to be." "Yes," he said. "We should." They stayed on the phone for another half hour after that, not talking about Vanessa Cho. She was done, filed, handled. They talked about other things. About Lily's end-of-year school thing that was apparently going to involve a performance of some kind that Lily was deeply invested in and secretive about. About a deal Ethan was looking at in the new year that he was uncertain about. About the fact that Mia had finally called the contractor her sister knew about the catering business idea, which was the first time she'd told anyone outside her immediate orbit about the notebook in the kitchen drawer. "Wait," Ethan said. "You've been sitting on a catering business plan?" "It's not a plan, it's a notebook." "What's in the notebook?" 47 pages of notes that haven't gone anywhere because starting something costs money I don't have." "Can I see it?" "Ethan, not as an investor, as someone who reads a lot of business plans and might have thoughts." She was quiet. This was, she recognized, the exact kind of offer she would normally deflect. The bell pepper math, the careful maintenance of her own independent ledger. But she'd also spent 3 days constructing a misread story about a silenced phone call, and she'd just finished saying they needed to get better at saying things before they became bigger than they needed to be. "Maybe," she said. "Progress," he said. She heard the smile in it. She rolled her eyes at the ceiling, which he couldn't see, but which she suspected he could somehow infer anyway. The end-of-year school performance arrived on the 17th of December, which was a Wednesday, which was a problem for Mia's shift schedule that she solved by trading with a coworker who owed her coverage from 2 weeks prior. She did not mention to Ethan that she'd arranged this. She simply showed up at the school auditorium at 6:30 with a coat that was too thin for the weather and her good scarf to compensate, and found him in the 3rd row with 2 seats saved, which meant he'd expected her to come. She sat down. "You saved me a seat." "I had a feeling." "You shouldn't assume." "I had a well-informed feeling." The auditorium was the specific chaos of a school event. Parents everywhere, small children in various states of costumed preparation visible through the door to the backstage area, a teacher attempting to manage the sound system with the stressed focus of someone who had not had enough of a budget for this. The seats were those molded plastic school chairs that had been engineered specifically to be uncomfortable, and the program printed on paper that someone's parent had clearly designed in a hurry, and the whole thing had the quality of something organized by people who cared a great deal and had very limited resources. Ethan was vibrating slightly with the particular energy of a parent whose child was about to perform. He was managing it with his usual surface composure, but she could see it in the way he kept looking toward the backstage door. "What is Lily's part?" Mia asked. "I don't know." "How do you not know?" "She wouldn't tell me. She said it was a surprise." He paused. "She made me promise not to ask her teacher." "Did you ask her teacher?" "I asked Marcus to look into it." "Ethan, I needed to know she wasn't doing something that would embarrass her." "And?" "Marcus couldn't find out either. Apparently there's a confidentiality situation." "There is not a confidentiality situation among second graders. Lily may have enforced one." Mia pressed her lips together to hold back the laugh. She did not fully succeed. The performance started at 7. It was a winter showcase, songs and short sketches, the range of talent across the grade levels creating a specific kind of audience experience where the parents of each child became briefly, fiercely convinced that their child was exceptional. The kindergartners sang a song about snowflakes with the energy of people who were not entirely sure where they were supposed to stand, but were fully committed to the general concept. The first graders did something with bells that was more enthusiastic than accurate. The second graders, Lily's class, were last. Lily's class performed a short original sketch, apparently written by the class collectively with guidance from their teacher, which explained certain structural choices about a community that had a disagreement and resolved it through a formal meeting process. It was, Mia recognized with a particular fondness, extremely on-brand for a class that contained Lily Cole. Lily played the facilitator. She stood at the front of the stage with the composure of someone who had been waiting her whole 7 years for an appropriate formal context and had finally located one. She held a small paper gavel. She called the meeting to order. When other children spoke their lines out of turn, she said clearly and into the microphone, "Please wait to be recognized." The audience laughed. Lily did not break. When the sketch concluded, the community agreement reached, the meeting adjourned, Lily turned to the audience and said, "Thank you for your attention." She said it like it was a board meeting. She said it with absolute sincerity. The applause was genuine and warm. Ethan clapped the way parents clap for their children, without any self-consciousness about volume. After the performance, in the hallway outside the auditorium, while parents collected children and jackets and programs, Lily found them and submitted to a hug from her father with the dignity of someone who had just completed a significant professional engagement. Then she turned to Mia. "I practiced the gavel part 12 times, she said. "It showed," Mia said. "You were perfect." "Not perfect," Lily said, which surprised her, until Lily continued. "Tommy forgot his line in the 3rd section, and I had to wait longer than we practiced. But I improvised." "Successfully?" Lily considered this with real seriousness. "Yes. But I'll make a note for next time." Ethan caught Mia's eye over Lily's head. She could see in his face the full weight of who his daughter was. The love and the bewilderment and the specific parental pride of someone watching a child be fully, completely herself in public for the first time, and finding that herself is a very specific and remarkable thing. They went for hot chocolate after. Lily's explicit post-performance request, non-negotiable, presented as a condition of the evening rather than a reward for it. They found a place 2 blocks from the school and sat in a booth, Lily between them, holding her hot chocolate with both hands the way Mia held her coffee. "Mom would have liked the gavel part," Lily said. She said it simply, without the weight that adults put around such mentions. Just a statement, a fact, a piece of information she was including in the evening. The booth went quiet for a beat. "She absolutely would have," Ethan said. His voice was even. Practiced, maybe. He'd been practicing this particular evenness for 4 years, but also genuine. "I think about her sometimes when I do good things," Lily said, still looking at her hot chocolate. "Like I want her to see." "She sees," Ethan said, and caught himself, and amended, I think she'd be so proud. She'd be telling everyone." Lily nodded, satisfied. "She was loud," she said fondly. "She was," Ethan said. "Very loud. You get it from her." "I'm not that loud." "Lily, the teacher in the 3rd row heard you calling the meeting to order from backstage." Lily looked momentarily uncertain about whether this was a compliment. Then she decided it was and moved on. Mia said nothing during this exchange. She sat with it, with the particular quality of being present in someone else's grief, Not intruding, not performing comfort, just being there. This was something she'd learned over years, that the most useful thing you could do in moments like this was not make them about your response to them. Just be present. Just let the moment be what it was. Afterward, she squeezed Lily's hand under the table. Lily squeezed back without looking up from her hot chocolate. It was such a small thing, the size of a child's hand, and it reached somewhere in Mia's chest that she hadn't expected to be reached. They drove back in the dark, Lily falling asleep in the back seat somewhere around the third traffic light, with the absolute confidence of a child who knew she was being taken care of. Ethan drove. Mia sat in the passenger seat and watched the city move past the window. The lights, the salt-pale streets, the people going about the ordinary business of a December Wednesday. "She's good," Mia said quietly, not wanting to wake Lily. "She's really good, Ethan." "I know." His voice was also quiet. "She's better than I deserve, honestly." "Stop." "I mean it. She got through things that would have broken most adults, and she came out the other side making notes for next time." He kept his eyes on the road. "I don't know how she does it." "She does it because you showed her how," Mia said. "Not by being perfect, by staying." He didn't answer for a moment. The light ahead turned red, and they stopped, and in the stillness she could see the profile of his face, the tiredness, the love, the 4 years of sustained effort written in the lines of someone who had held things together past the point where he was sure he could. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yeah." "The notebook, the catering thing." He was still looking at the road, hands on the wheel. "Why haven't you done it?" "I told you, capital. How much would you need to actually start? Not to build something large, just to actually begin." She was quiet. She'd done these numbers many times. She knew them the way she knew her lease terms and her utility averages and the exact cost of her grocery runs when she wasn't compromising. Probably 8,000 or 9,000 for equipment, insurance, business registration, an actual test run. "Mia, don't." "I'm not doing anything." "You're about to offer me money and I'm telling you not to." "I was going to ask if you'd let me read the notebook." "A beat?" She looked at him. He was absolutely straight-faced. "You were not." "I was also going to mention that Daniel's wife runs a small events business and might be willing to have a conversation about realistic startup costs and what the actual landscape looks like. Just a conversation, no strings." She looked at the sleeping child in the back seat. She looked at the man driving the car. She thought about all the distance she'd maintained, carefully, deliberately, between her life and his, the careful accounting of what she accepted and what she didn't, the bell pepper math as a kind of identity. "You're very patient," she said finally. "I've been practicing." "At what?" "At not pushing." He glanced at her briefly. "I have a tendency to want to fix things. I've been sitting on the notebook conversation for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He'd been sitting on it since she mentioned the contractor call. He'd held the offer back, waited, let her come to it in her own time. She didn't have a word for what that was. Restraint wasn't the right word. Care was closer. "Fine," she said. "You can read the notebook." "Yeah?" "Don't make it a project. I'm just going to read it. And then you're going to have thoughts." "I always have thoughts." "Try to have fewer than usual." The light turned green. He drove. In the back seat, Lily made a small sound in her sleep. Not distress, just the sound of a child, deeply, completely unconscious, trusting the forward motion of the car to handle the geography. "Can I say something?" Mia said. "You're going to say it anyway." "I'm asking first." A beat. "Go ahead." She looked out the window for a moment. The city, the dark, the winter lights. "I've been waiting for the thing that would make this feel real. The concrete thing. The thing that would tell me this is actually happening and not just something I'm being temporarily allowed." She paused. "I think tonight was it." He didn't say anything. "Lily talking about her mom," she said, "and being there for it. Not as your friend, not as the person who comes to soccer games, as..." She stopped, found the word, "as someone who belongs there." He was quiet for a long moment, long enough that they turned onto his street before he spoke. "You've belonged there for a long time," he said, I just needed to be honest enough to stop acting like it was temporary. She looked at him. When did you stop? He pulled into the driveway, cut the engine. He turned and looked at her in the half-dark. The porch light from the house, the ambient glow of the street, the sleeping child between them and behind them. The night I saw your contact name, he said. I stopped pretending that night. She held his gaze. All the careful distance she'd maintained. All the careful accounting, the bell pepper math, the deeply held conviction that her version of herself was not the version that got to have this. She felt it sitting differently now. Not gone. Not resolved. But lighter. Like something she'd been carrying for so long she'd stopped noticing the weight, and someone had simply pointed out that she could set it down. I'm going to bring the notebook on Tuesday, she said. Okay, and I don't want you to turn it into a fund. It's a food service startup with a first-year budget under $10,000. Even I have limits. I mean it. Mia, I'm going to read it and tell you what I think. That's all. She looked at him for one more second, then she nodded. She got out of the car. She helped him get Lily, still completely asleep, soft and heavy the way sleeping children were, out of the back seat and held the door while he carried her inside, and she grabbed Lily's small coat and backpack from the back seat and followed them up the porch steps. This was the ordinary thing, the unspectacular daily thing, carrying a child's coat up porch steps in December. She felt it the whole way up. Inside, while Ethan took Lily upstairs, Mia stood in the hallway and looked at the house the way she'd been looking at it for 2 years. The crown molding, the photographs on the walls, the small traces of a life that had reassembled itself after something terrible and kept going. There was a drawing on the side table near the stairs. Obviously Lily's. A figure labeled Mia in unsteady 7-year-old handwriting, standing next to a figure labeled Dad, and a smaller figure labeled me. All of them holding hands, drawn with a seriousness of intention that had no relationship to technical accuracy. She stood and looked at it for a long moment. She heard Ethan's footsteps on the stairs coming back down. She didn't move. He came around the corner and stopped when he saw what she was looking at. She drew that last week, he said. I see that. I didn't put it there. She put it there. I know. A beat. Then Ethan said carefully, Are you okay? She turned from the drawing. She looked at him, standing at the bottom of his own stairs in his own house, with his daughter asleep upstairs and a drawing on the table that his 7-year-old had placed there deliberately. And she thought about all the calculations she'd ever run, all the numbers, all the careful, self-protective math. Yeah, she said, I really am. And she meant it, not as a performance of being fine, not as management, not as the word she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. She meant it the way you mean things when the meaning is just true, without effort, without the usual work of making yourself believe it. She stayed another hour. They sat on the couch and talked about nothing important, the way they always had. And sometime around 11, she realized she'd completely stopped noticing the crown molding, the house, the careful accounting of who belonged where. She'd just stopped noticing. She was just sitting on the couch. And the couch was comfortable. And it was late. And she had an early shift. She gathered her coat and scarf, and Ethan walked her to the door. And before she left, he said very quietly so as not to carry upstairs, Thank you for tonight, for being there. I wanted to be there, she said. I know. A pause. That's the part I don't take for granted. She walked to her car. She'd driven for once, the one concession to December temperatures, and she sat in it for a moment with the engine warming up. She looked at the house through the windshield, the porch light, the warm windows. She pulled out her phone. She opened his contact. Future husband. Maybe. She looked at it for a long time. The maybe. The hedge. The door she'd been standing in front of. Her thumb hovered over the edit button. Then she put the phone in her pocket, started the car, and drove home. Not yet, but soon. She could feel it, the way you felt things when they were almost ready, not the absence of fear. She was still afraid. She suspected she'd be afraid for a while longer, and that the fear was not actually the enemy she'd been treating it as. The fear was just the size of what she wanted, a measurement, nothing more. She drove through this December city, the lights, the cold, the salt-pale streets, and she thought about a drawing on a side table and a small hand squeezed under a booth table, and the way a man had waited 3 weeks to mention a notebook because he was practicing not pushing. She thought about all the ways she'd told herself the story wrong, and she thought about what it might feel like to tell it right. The notebook arrived on a Tuesday, as promised. Mia carried it in her bag like it was something that might detonate. 47 pages of handwritten notes, sketches of menus, cost breakdowns that were half realistic and half wishful. A list of potential clients she'd written at 2 in the morning 2 years ago when she'd been unable to sleep and had let herself imagine, just briefly, what a different version of her life might look like. The pages were not organized. Some were written in pen, some in pencil, some in the margins of pages she'd started for something else and then repurposed. The whole thing was evidence of a mind that had been working on a problem privately for a long time without permission to take it seriously. She dropped it on his coffee table when she got there Tuesday evening and immediately second-guessed the decision. "You don't have to read it tonight," she said, "or ever. It's not a real business plan. It's just notes." Ethan picked it up. He turned the first few pages with the same careful attention he brought to term sheets and financial disclosures, which was either exactly the right energy or completely wrong, and she couldn't decide which. "Sit down," he said. "I'm fine standing." "Mia, sit down. I'm going to read this, and you hovering is going to make it impossible." She sat down. She picked up the throw pillow from the corner of the couch and held it in her lap, which she recognized as an extremely transparent anxiety behavior and did not put down. He read for 40 minutes. Not skimming, reading, the way he read things that mattered, which she knew because she'd watched him read things before, and this was the same quality of attention. He turned pages slowly. He went back occasionally to reread something. He made no sounds and offered no running commentary, which was both exactly what she needed and genuinely agonizing. When he finished, he set the notebook on the coffee table with care and looked at her. "Why catering specifically?" he asked. Not "this is good" or "this needs work" or any of the framing she'd been bracing for. Just a real question, first thing, like he wanted to understand before he assessed. She answered honestly, "Because I'm good in restaurant environments. I know the rhythm of an event. I know what breaks down under pressure and where the real costs hide. And," she stopped, the more honest part, "because it's mine. It's not a job someone gave me. It's something I built from thinking about it for 2 years. He nodded. "The startup estimate on page 32 is low." "I know. Equipment depreciation isn't accounted for." "I know that too. The client list is solid. The corporate lunch angle is smart. You have a read on that market from Harlow's that most people starting out don't have." He tapped the notebook. "The menu concepts are good. Specific without being narrow." She looked at him. "Are you being careful with me right now?" "What?" "Are you softening it because you don't want to discourage me?" He met her eyes. "No, the financials need work. The concept is real." A pause. "I wouldn't tell you the concept was real if it wasn't. That's not useful to you." She believed him. That was the thing about Ethan. The precise, undecorated quality of his assessments was one of the things she'd trusted about him for 5 years before she'd trusted him with anything else. He didn't perform encouragement. If he said the concept was real, it was real. "Daniel's wife," she said, "the events business. Her name is Sonia. She started with $8,000 and a van, and she's been running it for 6 years. He paused. "She's not a contact I'm leveraging for you. She's a person who's done what you're describing and might be useful to talk to. That's all." Mia looked at the notebook on the coffee table. 47 pages, 2 years of 2 in the morning thinking. She thought about all the times she'd opened that drawer and then closed it again, telling herself the timing wasn't right, the capital wasn't there, the risk was too large for someone in her situation. She thought about what Jess had said. "You audit good things until you can prove they don't add up." "Okay," she said. "I'll talk to Sonia." He didn't make a production of it. He just nodded, picked up his own coffee and said, "You want to stay for dinner? I made pasta." She looked at him. "I salted the water," he said, preemptively. She stayed for dinner. The pasta was noticeably better than it used to be. She told him so, which he accepted without excessive satisfaction, and she told him that the bar he'd been clearing was extremely low, which he also accepted, and they ate at his kitchen table and talked about Lily's ongoing principal correspondence. The follow-up meeting had finally been granted, scheduled for the second week of January, and Lily was preparing with what Ethan described as a level of rigor that made him feel professionally observed. And it was ordinary and warm, and she felt, sitting there, the particular rightness of a thing that had found its correct shape. Christmas came. She spent Christmas Eve with her sister's family in Milwaukee, took the train up on the afternoon of the 24th, arrived into the controlled chaos of Jess's house with its 2 kids under 10 and a dog that treated every visitor as a search and rescue situation requiring immediate attention. She had not been back for Christmas in 2 years. Work, the schedule, the complicated logistics of holiday shift coverage. And being there, in Jess's kitchen while her niece asked her 14 consecutive questions about nothing in particular, was its own kind of grounding. The reminder that she had a life that preceded Ethan, that the people who loved her had always included this, these kids, this kitchen, her sister's steady hand on her shoulder when they stood at the sink doing dishes after the kids were in bed. "Tell me everything," Jess said. So she did. Standing at the sink, passing dishes, Mia told her sister the arc of the last 6 weeks, the restaurant, the drive home from Lily's performance, the notebook, Sonia, the contact name still unchanged in her phone because she hadn't found the right moment and she wasn't going to force it. Jess listened without interrupting, which was the second time she'd done this in recent memory, and which Mia found both notable and moving. "Are you happy?" Jess asked when she finished. Simple question. Not is it working out or do you think it'll last? Just, are you happy? Mia thought about it genuinely, the way the question deserved. Yeah, not in the tidy way. It's still complicated. I still run the numbers sometimes, but she handed Jess the last plate. Yeah, I think I actually am. Jess took the plate and dried it and put it in the cabinet. Then she put her arm around Mia's shoulders, a brief, solid pressure, the physical language of a sister who had watched her younger self get built and rebuilt and was glad to see what she'd finally assembled. "Good," she said. "It's about time." Mia took the train back to Chicago on Christmas morning. Ethan had Lily for Christmas. His parents were coming, and it was their family tradition, and she had not been included in this and had not expected to be, because there were parts of his life that had their established shape, and she was not yet woven into all of them. That was fine. That was correct. She spent Christmas afternoon in her apartment with takeout Thai food and a movie she'd been meaning to watch for 6 months, and it was quiet and comfortable and hers, and she didn't feel the absence of company as a deficit the way she once might have. He called her at 6. "Merry Christmas," he said. He sounded tired in the warm way, not the depleted way, the tiredness of a full day rather than a hard one. "Merry Christmas. How is your mother? She asked about you twice. What did you tell her?" "The truth." A pause. "Which is what, exactly?" "That you're important to me and that things are moving." He paused. She didn't push further. She looked satisfied, which is almost more alarming. Mia laughed. "How's Lily?" "Asleep on the couch, surrounded by wrapping paper. She held out until 4:30, which is a personal best." A pause. "She asked for you this morning. When she opened a book she'd wanted, she said she wanted to show you." The pause that followed this was just long enough for Mia to feel it in her chest. "Tell her I can't wait to see it," she said. "I will." They talked for another 20 minutes. Not about anything important. About his mother's opinions on the television. About the book Lily had gotten. About Mia's niece's 14 questions. About nothing and everything in the way they always talked. And when they hung up, Mia sat on her couch in her quiet apartment and looked at the ceiling and felt settled. Not complete in the sense of having all the pieces in place. Complete in the sense of knowing where she was and what she was building toward and being okay with the pace of the building. She took out her phone. She opened his contact. "Future husband." "Maybe." Her thumb hovered over the edit button for the 3rd time, and for the 3rd time she put the phone down. Not yet. But she was starting to understand what she was waiting for. It wasn't certainty. She'd stopped believing certainty was something that arrived before you made a decision. It was something smaller than that, something more honest. She was waiting to feel, not just to know, that the maybe was no longer a hedge. She wasn't quite there, but she was close. New Year's Eve fell on a Thursday, which meant Mia worked a double. Harlow's ran a ticketed dinner service that filled every table twice, with a prix-fixe menu and champagne at midnight and the logistical challenge of a full house of people who had come specifically to be happy and stay late and require things. It was one of the most intense shifts of the year, and she came out of it at 12:45 in the morning with sore feet and a satisfaction that was purely physical, the satisfaction of having done difficult work correctly. Ethan had texted her at midnight, "Happy New Year." Lily lasted until 11:48. I counted. She'd been too deep in the service to respond until she was outside in the cold, coat on, breath visible, the street quiet in the specific way of a city that had just finished celebrating and was now reconsidering. She typed back, "Happy New Year, proud of her." He replied, "Drive safe." She replied, "Taking a cab, don't worry." He replied, "Too late." She smiled at her phone in a parking lot at 12:50 in the morning on the first day of a new year, which was not the most dignified circumstance but was a real one, and real was what she'd decided to live in. January moved differently than December. December had been about adjustment, about two people learning to be honest with each other in real time, about a family event and a phone call and a notebook and all the small concrete things that accumulated into something you could actually stand on. January was quieter. The holidays were over, the city returned to its working self, and what remained was the daily thing, the Tuesday nights and the texts and the Saturday soccer games when the league ran indoor winter sessions, and Lily's principal meeting, which Mia attended on a Wednesday afternoon by rearranging her schedule in a way she did not mention to Ethan until she was already in the parking lot of Lily's school. She texted him, "I'm outside Lily's school. Don't say anything." He replied immediately, "What?" She typed, "She asked me last week. You were going to be in a meeting. Don't make it a thing." A longer pause. Then, "Thank you." She put her phone in her pocket and went inside. The meeting was 20 minutes. Lily sat across from her principal with the specific composure of someone who had prepared and was now deploying that preparation with measured precision. She presented her second letter, a revised version incorporating the principal's initial response, and made her case with a clarity and a calm that left both Mia and the principal visibly impressed. The principal acknowledged the procedural point about retroactive application. She did not reverse the rock ban. She did offer a structured sharing period for students who wished to bring items of natural significance. Lily considered this for a moment. "That addresses the intent, if not the letter," she said. "Yes," the principal said, who had clearly not expected to be negotiating with a second grader and was reassessing several assumptions. "I'll accept it," Lily said. Afterward, in the hallway, Lily looked up at Mia with the expression of someone who had achieved a satisfactory outcome through legitimate process. "She didn't give me everything I asked for," Lily said. "No," Mia agreed, "but she gave me something real." "She did." Lily thought about this. That's usually how it works, isn't it? You ask for everything and you get something real. Mia looked at this 7-year-old, this deeply specific, entirely her own 7-year-old, who had arrived in Mia's life through no plan of hers and had quietly become one of the central facts of it. "Yeah," she said, "that's pretty much how it works." She drove Lily home. They talked about the rocks on the way, about the one she'd been given in solidarity, which she'd now named Gregory, and about the new sharing period, which she was already planning to use strategically. Mia asked questions that were real questions, and Lily answered them with the seriousness they deserved, and the drive was 20 minutes that felt like something she'd carry for a long time. She didn't stay when she dropped Lily off. Ethan wasn't home from his meeting yet, and she had a shift at 5. She walked Lily to the door, waited until she was inside, and drove back across the city. She called Rachel from the car. "I went to Lily's school meeting," she said. "I know, you texted me. She stopped. Found the thing she was actually saying. "I wanted to tell someone who would understand what it means that I did that." Rachel was quiet for a moment, then, "I understand what it means." "Okay." "Mia." "Yeah." "Change the contact name." She laughed, short and surprised. "Not yet." "Soon." "Soon," she agreed. The moment came on a Saturday in late January, which was ordinary and specific in the way the most important moments tend to be. Not engineered, not earned through a grand gesture or a resolved crisis. Just available, suddenly, in the middle of a normal afternoon that had arranged itself into the right shape without asking permission. They were at his house. Lily was in the backyard in her coat doing something with a collection of rocks she'd laid out in what appeared to be a deliberate pattern that she had declined to explain. Ethan was on the couch with his laptop reviewing something. Mia was in the kitchen making tea, an act that had become reflex, something her hands did in his house without requiring a decision. And the radio was on, something neither of them had specifically chosen, just the station that played in the afternoon. It was a completely ordinary Saturday, and she was happy, not performing it, not managing toward it, just there, in it. In his kitchen with the correct lamp on and the heating that worked and Lily visible through the window communing seriously with her rocks, and Ethan 15 feet away on the couch, and the radio, and the tea, she looked at his kitchen. She looked at the cabinet where the pasta strainer lived in the wrong place. She looked at the lamp she'd turned on the first time she ever came here and had turned on every time since. She looked at the window and the yard and the small figure in the red coat crouched over her careful arrangement of rocks. And she thought about a 7-year-old who had climbed into her lap the first time they met and announced she smelled like cookies. She picked up her phone. She opened his contact. She looked at the name. Future husband. Maybe. For the last time. She pressed edit. She deleted the word maybe. She stared at what was left. Future husband. Her heart was doing something loud and specific, and she stood in his kitchen alone with the decision for a moment. Just her, just the choice, the small permanence of it. The maybe had been a hedge. A door held slightly open so she could retreat if she needed to. A way of wanting something without fully admitting she wanted it, which was the posture she'd maintained for most of her adult life, and which had kept her safe and also kept her exactly where she was. She saved the contact. She put the phone face down on the counter. She finished making the tea. She carried both mugs into the living room, his and hers, the way it always was. She always made two. And she set his on the coffee table beside his laptop and sat down next to him on the couch. He glanced up from the screen with the brief, automatic acknowledgement of someone registering a presence they were accustomed to. Tea, she said. Thanks. He went back to the laptop. She curled her legs up on the cushion and looked out the window at Lily, who had finished her arrangement and was now standing back from it with her hands on her hips, evaluating it with the critical distance of an artist assessing finished work. What is she doing? Mia asked. I genuinely have no idea. Should we ask? She'll tell us when she's ready. He glanced through the window. Or she'll tell us it's confidential. She's 7. She's Lily. He said it the way you said the name of someone who had reorganized your understanding of what a person could be. They sat in a comfortable quiet. Outside, Lily apparently reached a conclusion about the arrangement and nodded to herself with the satisfaction of a decision made. She picked up one rock, just one, adjusted, and put it in a slightly different position. Mia watched her. She thought about the contact name sitting changed in her phone on the kitchen counter. She thought about all the calculations she'd done over 5 years, all the time she'd run the numbers and found reasons and maintained the careful distance between what she had and what she wanted. She thought about her sister's voice. You just have to live it sometimes. She thought about the principal meeting and Lily's face in the hallway. You ask for everything and you get something real. She thought about the Thursday kitchen in November with the ruined pasta and the rain on the window. How long ago it seemed. How inevitable it felt in retrospect. The way important things always felt inevitable once you could see the whole shape of them. Ethan. He looked up from the laptop. I changed your contact name, she said. A beat. He was very still. To what? He asked. She held his gaze. She did not hedge. She did not qualify. She said it the same way she'd said, I'm choosing this on the sidewalk in December. Simply, directly, without the protection of irony or the safety net of humor. Future husband. She watched it reach him, watched it move through his face, the initial stillness, and then something behind it shifting, something that had been braced against a possibility it hadn't fully believed in finally, carefully, standing down. His jaw moved once. He looked at her with the particular open expression she'd seen only rarely, the unguarded one, the one that cost him something to let her see. No, maybe, he said. No, maybe. He closed the laptop. He set it on the coffee table beside the mugs. He turned toward her fully on the couch. Nothing performative about the movement, just the physical fact of reorienting toward something that mattered. Mia. His voice was quiet. The particular quiet of something meant. Are you sure? I've been sure for longer than I was ready to admit, she said. I was doing the math. I do the math on everything. And the math was never the problem. She looked at him steadily. I was the problem. I was trying to calculate my way out of wanting something before I let myself want it, and I can't do that anymore. I don't want to. He reached out and took her hand. She let him. No hesitation, no managed acceptance. Just yes. Immediately, the way yes felt when it was the true answer. I'm not going to make you any promises right now that sound like a proposal, he said, because you'd probably tell me it was too fast and you'd be right. I would absolutely tell you that. But I want you to know. He paused. He was choosing carefully the way he did with things that mattered. What you said in that contact name, I take it seriously. I've been taking it seriously since November. I know, she said. That's why I changed it. He looked at her. She looked back. Outside the window, Lily had apparently concluded her rock arrangement and was now sitting cross-legged on the ground beside it, with her coat spread around her like a small, very serious bird. The afternoon light was the particular pale gold of a Chicago winter, making everything slightly softer than the air temperature suggested it should be. Can I tell you something? Ethan said. Yeah. The first time you came to this house, the second time we were here together, when you helped me with the shelf. He shook his head slightly. I told myself it was just what a friendship looked like when it was really good. I put a tremendous amount of effort into believing that. How long did it work? About 6 months? A pause. Then I stopped being able to maintain it and just started not talking about it instead, which is basically the same effort with worse results. She laughed, a real one. We wasted a lot of time. We didn't waste it. He shook his head. We needed it. I needed it. I was not in a place where I could have given you what you deserved 3 years ago, or 2. He stopped. I was still figuring out how to be a full person after a long time of just being functional. She understood what he meant. She understood it better than she might have explained because she'd been watching him do it. The slow, unglamorous work of a person reassembling themselves after loss, not dramatically, not in moments of visible breakthrough, but in the accumulated small choices of daily life. The therapy appointments he kept, even when he said nothing, changed in them. The way he talked about Claire to Lily. The careful, deliberate honesty of it. The way he'd stopped hiding behind his professional self when he was with her, earlier and earlier, until it was just him, consistently, without the performance. I wasn't ready either, she said honestly. I was carrying things I hadn't looked at, about what I deserved. What kind of person gets to have this? She met his eyes. I'm still working on it, but I'm not using it as a reason to stay outside anymore. He squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. Through the window, Lily stood up from her cross-legged position with the abruptness of a decision made and turned toward the house, and Mia could see from here the expression on her face, the look of someone finished with one thing and ready for the next. The complete, unsentimental forward motion of childhood. The back door opened. I'm done, Lily announced, coming in from the cold in a blast of January air. She pulled off her coat with the efficiency of someone who had learned the art of shedding outerwear without untying it first. Mia, you have to come see what I made. What did you make? Mia asked. A map. Of what? Lily looked at her with the expression of someone explaining something obvious, of everything important. She pulled Mia's hand. Come see. Mia let herself be pulled. She got up from the couch, glancing back at Ethan as she stood. He was watching with the expression she'd cataloged months ago and had finally allowed herself to read accurately. Not friendship, not casual affection, but the specific and undisguised look of a man watching someone he loved be exactly who they were. She followed Lily out the back door into the cold. The backyard was small, city-sized, practical, a patch of winter grass and an old oak tree at the far end. In the center of the yard, Lily's arrangement spread across a 2-foot radius, stones of various sizes placed in deliberate positions, with small sticks marking what appeared to be routes between them. and a few leaves anchored by pebbles at specific points. "This one is home," Lily said, pointing to the largest rock in the center. "And this one is school." She pointed to one nearby. "And this one is Grandma's," a rock at one edge. "And this is the soccer field." Another. She moved around the arrangement with the confidence of a cartographer presenting final work. "And this one," she pointed to a smooth gray stone placed close to the center rock touching it, "is you." Mia crouched down to look at the arrangement. Up close, the care of it was even more apparent. The specific selection of each stone, the deliberateness of the distances and the placements, the way the stone representing her was positioned, close to home, touching it. She was quiet for a moment. "Gregory is the solidarity stone," Lily said, pointing. "He's over here because he represents everyone who supported the cause." "Of course," Mia said. Her voice was doing something she was controlling carefully. "Do you like it?" Lily asked. She asked it the way children asked when they'd made something that mattered and wanted the response to match the making. Mia looked at the map, the large stone at the center, the smooth gray one beside it, the careful distances, the sticks for roads, the small, specific, entirely serious world of a 7-year-old who had put her right next to home without any uncertainty about where she belonged. "I love it," Mia said, and meant it fully and without complication, which was something she'd been working toward for a long time. Lily nodded, satisfied. "I'm going to make a better one in spring," she said, practical as always. "When there are more materials, this is just the winter version." "The winter version is perfect," Mia said. Lily looked at her with the patient correction of someone who had already explained this. "Not perfect, but it's what I had." Mia laughed. She stood up and looked back toward the house. Ethan was at the kitchen window. She could see him through the glass, watching them. He raised a hand. She raised hers back. She stood in the winter yard with a 7-year-old who had placed her stone next to home and left no maybe in the gesture, no qualification, no calculation. Children didn't do that. Children looked at where something belonged and put it there. She thought about the contact name on her phone. Future husband. Clean, finally. Without the head she'd been hiding behind since June. She thought about all the math she'd done, all the calculations that were supposed to protect her from wanting too much. From reaching for something outside her weight class, from being the person who miscalculated and pulled everything down. She thought about how long she'd treated the gap between their lives as a reason instead of a fact, which was the essential confusion she'd finally managed to untangle. A fact was just true. A reason required you to do something with it, and she had spent years doing the wrong thing with a fact that was just a fact. She thought about what she'd told Ethan on the couch. "I was trying to calculate my way out of wanting something before I let myself want it." And she thought about how long that had been her posture, not just with him, but with the notebook, with the catering business, with the idea of a life that looked different from the one she'd been managing. The careful pre-rejection of things she wanted, so that the actual rejection, if it came, couldn't reach the part of her that had already wanted it. It was a reasonable strategy for surviving disappointment. It was a terrible strategy for building anything. "Mia," Lily said. She'd moved to the oak tree and was examining its bark with scientific attention. "Are you going to be here for my birthday?" Her birthday was in March. Lily had mentioned it twice in the past month, both times with the specific casualness of someone communicating something important while maintaining deniability. "When is it exactly?" Mia asked, already knowing. "March 14th. Lily traced a groove in the bark. "I'm going to have a rock theme." "Of course you are." "Dad said I could invite 8 people. I've only invited 6 so far." A pause with the weight of an unasked question inside it. "I'll be there," Mia said. Lily looked over her shoulder with an expression of profound satisfaction, the look of someone who had arranged a thing by not quite asking for it and watched it resolve correctly. "Okay," she said, as if it were simple, as if it had always been obvious. Maybe it had been, to her. They went back inside. Mia made more tea because the first round had gone cold, and Ethan ordered dinner because nobody was cooking and they'd all stopped pretending otherwise, and Lily got out the book she'd received for Christmas and established herself at the kitchen table to read while the adults talked around her, which was a configuration that had become comfortable over months of being exactly this way. At some point in the evening, after dinner, while Lily was in the bath and they were cleaning up in the kitchen, Ethan said, without preamble, without looking up from the dishes, I talked to Daniel today about Sonia. She looked at him. And? She's available to meet the third week of February. No agenda, just coffee. He rinsed a plate. She asked me to tell you she remembers what it felt like to have the notebook and not the capital. Mia was quiet for a moment. She said that? Her words. I told her about the 47 pages. A pause. I hope that's okay. It's okay. She picked up a dish towel. Ethan. Yeah. Thank you. She said it plainly, not deflecting, not following it with a qualifier. Not just for Sonia. For all of it. For how you've done this. He looked at her. The kitchen was warm, the lamp was on. The sound of the bath upstairs and Lily's intermittent off-key singing, which she did only when she thought no one was listening. You did it too, he said. Don't give me more credit than I'm owed. You waited 3 weeks to mention the notebook. I was practicing. I know. She folded the dish towel. That's the part I'm thanking you for. He looked at her with the quiet expression, the real one, the one that had taken her 2 years to let herself read and another year to stop being afraid of. Then he crossed the kitchen, closed the distance between them, and put his arms around her in the straightforward way of someone who had decided to stop treating closeness like something that required careful management. She leaned into it. No performance, no managed acceptance. Just yes. The way yes felt when it was the true answer. They stood in the kitchen and Lily sang something unrecognizable and slightly flat from upstairs. And the city did its city things outside, and neither of them said anything because some things didn't need words to become permanent. The contact name in her phone stayed exactly as she'd changed it. Future husband. 2 words. No qualifier. No door held open for retreat, just the truth, finally, in the smallest possible place. And from there, in all the places that mattered. This is the thing about love that arrives the long way. It doesn't look like a revelation when it happens. It looks like a person in your kitchen making tea the way they always do, knowing where the lamp is, knowing which burner runs hot. It looks like 5 years of showing up and one Thursday night when a phone screen told the truth you'd been keeping. It looks like a 7-year-old placing a rock next to the center and calling it by your name without hesitation, because she'd never questioned where you belonged. It doesn't ask you to be ready. It doesn't wait for the math to resolve. It asks only that you stop calculating long enough to notice what's already been true. Mia Bennett had spent years believing the version of herself she was, the double shifts, the careful budget, the notebook in the drawer, was not enough for the life she actually wanted. She'd been wrong about that. Not because the circumstances changed, because she finally looked at the evidence she'd been collecting for 5 years and let herself read it honestly. And Ethan Cole, who had locked a room inside himself after the worst year of his life and handed people keys that didn't work, had finally met someone who hadn't needed a key. Who had simply sat in the kitchen long enough, shown up on enough Tuesdays, loved his daughter with enough genuine specificity that the lock had stopped mattering. Neither of them was finished. They were both still imperfect in all their original ways. She still did the math. He still closed off when he should open up. She still held things at arm's length when they scared her. He still needed to be told directly when something mattered rather than intuiting it on his own. They would argue about movies and steal food from each other's plates and have conversations that required 2 attempts to get to the honest version. There was a lease with 5 months left on it and a notebook that needed a proper business plan and a child who would grow up with the complicated inheritance of loss and love in equal measure. There was no clean resolution to any of it. There was just this. 2 people who had chosen each other, not once, not in a single grand moment, but repeatedly. In the Tuesday nights and the silenced phone calls and the 47 pages and the stones in a winter yard. In all the small, specific, unglamorous acts of showing up that constitute, in the end, what love actually is. Not the feeling, the practice. Not the promise, the daily choosing. Upstairs, Lily's singing stopped. The bath was done. She would be out shortly with opinions about the evening and updates on the rock and a question neither of them would be able to answer, which she would then take under advisement. Mia stepped back from Ethan and looked at him. He looked back at her. They were just 2 people in a kitchen, the most ordinary thing. She's going to need help with her hair, Mia said. I know, you're better at it. I'm marginally better at it. More than marginally. She picked up the dish towel again and hung it on the oven handle. Go tell her I'll be up in a minute." He went. She heard his footsteps on the stairs and Lily's voice, immediate, certain, full of the things she needed to say, and the specific sound of a house that was used to being occupied by people who belonged in it. She stood in the kitchen alone for a moment. She looked at the lamp. She thought, "I turned that on the first time I came here," and then she stopped thinking about it, because Lily was calling her name from upstairs, and there were things that needed doing, and the evening was still going, and she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She went upstairs. She didn't look back. She didn't need to.